Up, I think we're live, and look as we have Bob.
Live.
Bob has a green screen, but there's nothing screened back there.
I have trouble figuring out how to light this thing properly. I've used it in like a couple videos and I still get a weird like blur, and yeah, that was like way back. I haven't tried in a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't even bother with the green screen. And in fact, I have a natural blue behind me, so I could turn my wall into a green screen. But
It's
there you
true.
go.
It's funny, honestly, how things like Zoom are seemingly better at replacing a background than the editing software that I use. So maybe it's just my editing software, but not me. I don't know.
Well, there's a secret is that actually green screens are tricky because they don't just work automatically. You have to fine tune them. That's the trick. And people just think it's magic. It's like, no, it's magic with a lot of work.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's the thing, is like it has to be lit perfectly evenly. Again, at least for the settings that are set in the software that I use, whereas Zoom seems to be pretty good at, like, things have come a long way with replacing backgrounds automatically. But yeah.
Well, it's amazing when there's a need for technology, how quickly people
and there was a lot of needs with Zoom last couple years ago.
Invention.
Bingo. Yeah.
So welcome, Bob World Builder. 3 words, not 2, not 1,
and not 4. So many people say Bob the World Builder, but
I told you.
Steven does it like all the time.
Yeah. I don't really. Yeah, I've stopped worrying about it.
Well, now
whenever you would come up, he would say Bob the World Builder, and then I would be like, or if there's another guest, I'd be like, it's just Bob World Builder. There's none of that, Steven.
No, I've realized that. Well, I think of it 2 ways. Like when I was creating this name, I wanted it to include like my actual name, Robert, but everybody calls me Bob. And I wanted to have like a little bit of a sort of a brand kind of name, a persona, whatever. So Bob World Builder. And I built it off of that idea, like Bob the Builder. But I thought it would be smarter to keep it that same number of syllables, but everybody still like defaults to Bob the World Builder. So who knows? If I named it the other way, maybe people would call it this. We'll never know.
Well, you're stuck with it forever, because the first time I found you was your infamous 5 feet video.
Oh,
like, that video is probably your most popular one. That was everywhere.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of my, or was it the food video, is actually now my most popular.
The one with the rations.
Yes, rations. but
I like
after
the
that
one.
Oh yeah, that was a fun recent one we did. I try to do one of those every couple months now, still, because people love them. And I mean,
I particularly like it because I feel vindicated as a game designer due to the fact that I mean, we eventually we just did it because that's all people think. Oh yeah, you could easily drink this giant potion in one of Pathfinder 2's 3 actions. But like, the game would probably be more balanced if you could take 2 of your 3 actions to drink it. And clearly your video shows that you should be taking 2 of your 3 actions on the 6-second turn to drink it, because it certainly takes a long time.
I always thought of the potions as, what are they called? Tinctures or tinitures? They're like this big. Like
sure.
I
always
know,
but the really tiny vial.
The description's wrong.
In the Dungeon Master's Guide for D&D or in the core rulebook for Pathfinder does not say that it's just that tiny vial.
But I believe it's like a thimble. I think it's like this. It's like this big. And you're like,
sure. Well, okay, that one you could do in one action.
Oh yeah,
fine.
Yeah. I mean, and that's how it should be, for sure. That was made basically the consensus in the comments of that video, was like how in The Witcher it's typically portrayed as like very tiny vials, and he literally has a bandolier of them or something, so he can quickly down what he needs. And that's kind of the way it would have to be to get it done in one action.
Yeah, actually,
pretty much.
The Witcher's exactly the way I think of them. They're like,
maybe The Witcher is why you think of them that way, Steven.
Could be. But I always thought that they were small because we always had the argument, and we still have the argument to this day. It's like when they get a really good potion, they're like, "Can I drink half of it?" And think about it. If you have a big potion, you could drink half of it. So that's why I'm like, no, it's small. You have to just go like it's a shot. You can't drink half of it.
You could be like, if you drink half of it, then I'll roll you a random table to see what happens, because you're not drinking all of the effects. And
True.
to get into our topic of weird randomness, I think that like weird potion mixability and other things like that used to be in like prior editions were just kind of a fun random thing, that all of those tables have a bad reputation, like we said in the title. I think players fear randomness because of the fact that, well, if you have things that are random for long enough over the course of a long-term campaign, the players are going to get screwed by it the most, because they're there for the whole campaign, whereas your big villain is only there for one fight. There's only so much that the randomness can like really do to them, that compared to the fact they were already expected to die anyway at the end of the fight.
Yeah, like I think of it as much as both the players and the GM are subject to the dice. Ultimately, the GM is like setting up the agenda of when the dice are used, you know, but the players are completely at the mercy of it. So anything that's going to be random, like you're saying, ultimately will kind of fall on them.
Yeah, and I think it's what leads players to like fear the randomness and to overall be like, no, we'd rather have it so it's not so random. But randomness can really lead to fun, emergent gameplay. And I know you did a video, Bob, about the deck of many things that I strongly agree that is not necessarily a campaign ender, and have thrown it or like the tarot deck of many things from the Encyclopedia Magica back in like AD&D, or the Harrow deck of many things in Pathfinder, into so many games, and it just leads to like weird, interesting plot lines that you never would have just randomly created on your own. Like
exactly, yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is, I guess a lot of random outcomes, you know, they're not going to be the most desirable thing, and that's what the players are after, is whatever most benefits them. And so anything random, you know, not only could it be something not desirable, but it could be something that is actually bad. And so just the possibility makes randomness as a whole something they don't want in the game typically. But I don't know, maybe we're generalizing a little here. I'm sure there are plenty of players out there who do love the wackiness of it, because that, for example, you know, part of the reason that I'm trying to lean into it more, because it's more of a theme in the game Dungeon Crawl Classics, which I'm trying to use now at my main table. And it works for my group because my players do like the wackiness that can just kind of come out of it. Basically, like my players are very casual players. Like they don't read a lot of the books. Like it's really one or two of them who also GM and are really into it. But the rest just, you know, come there and sit down. Like they don't even own their own dice, but we've been playing for years together. It's just that's just how they enjoy the game, or they're just along for the ride of what happens. So.
No, that's fair. And like I had one player back in my high school group who, if you remember, or I guess maybe we're not playing AD&D, but there was wild magic tables, and there was a spell called like Nahuls or somebody with an reckless Dwemer that was a first level spell, and it attempts to cast a higher level spell, but it always 100% does a wild surge instead. And so that player was like, I'm just only going to cast that. So it was always a D100, and it's like, well, you know, it might be a fireball, even though it might using a first level slot. I mean, only like maybe 5% chance that it's actually a fireball with like longer range or whatever the other effects are. 95% that like butterflies come out of my mouth, but whatever. And it led to just weird things like, gosh, he double cast that one time, and I think that like it caused the enemy soldiers to fall in love with him while a wall of force appeared between them. So they were like beating on the wall of force, being like, "No, let us in." Yeah,
and the thing, like, you could never end up with something like that in a game where you don't lean into this a little bit. I don't know. See, I'm all for it at this point. I mean, I guess, you know, there's still you want some of it in moderation. Still, you can't have every single moment, every encounter being determined that way. But yeah, it's like I can't not have it.
Sometimes it leads to plot lines that are just so fitting that you would think, like, how was this written by random chance? Like, for example, in the Kingmaker game that Linda ran for us, one of my fellow players was playing like a super arrogant elf, and he drew a card from a random deck, and it was the marriage. And so a genie princess wanted to marry him, but he was really arrogant and only liked elves. So he was like, no, you're not an elf. So she had someone use a wish with her to turn him into a human as like a punishment for his sort of like the Beauty and the Beast thing with the arrogant prince. And like, it was very fitting. It was all from a random card.
So a few quick things, because we jumped in much faster than I expected.
Sure, yeah. I saw you were about to say something. Go for it.
No, first of all, if you have any questions, you can ask them. We always answer questions from members first, as well as super chats, as we answer immediately. So if you have any questions, let us know, or comments. I'm sure we'll talk about a whole bunch of things. Also, the Battlesuit Mastery Strange and Unusual just came out for Pathfinder.
Yes.
And the 5e version is coming out like any day now. I'm actually kind of done with it. I'm just waiting for the monster parts to... what we do is the monster parts for each monster, these are the parts that drop when you defeat the monster or negotiate with them. And then you can make weapons and gear from it using our monster part system. It's like Monster Hunter, but for 5e and Pathfinder. It actually takes a while, and I don't want to be the only one, so I have the community go through it, and they're going through it right now. But I expect the book for 5e to be out next week, so you can get that at battlezoo.com. And now we have 2 out. I can't believe we got 2 out, and we're working on the 3rd. I was like, wow, this stuff's like, it seems like I just released the first one yesterday, but now we're up to the 3rd one. And the 3rd one is RPG Superstar, which you can enter now and be published. So if you want to be published in this book, just go to rpgsuperstar.com and submit a monster, and maybe you're published 3 times. In fact, one of our people, not only they've been published last year and this year, but both of their monsters are being turned into ancestries that exist in our world, and they're super excited because they keep winning. Even though, like, not only do I keep winning, but then you keep turning my monsters into races and ancestries, and then you write whole books about that. And I was like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, you got to hire that person.
Maybe.
I don't know how many. Like, how do you have like a set team of a couple like full-time people, or like how?
Just me and Steven, and then we got
some
freelancers.
Freelancers, yeah.
But we're the only ones who are like full-time working on this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's like I publish some like 5e one-shots, and like it's me, but I work with freelance writers and like recently a freelance editor. Prior to that, I was doing the editing, and my wife would help with the editing because she has a writing degree actually. But yeah,
we
the small teams that create this industry.
Well, yes and no. I mean, here's the thing. So Mark is full-time.
Yeah.
I'm full-time, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's like 2 pretty much full-time, part-time Foundry developers. They actually work for Foundry.
Okay.
And they do all of our Foundry development.
Aren't they volunteers but for Foundry?
They're
volunteers, they do a lot
of
things, and they don't work for the company, but they're very closely tied.
They get paid. It's not volunteer.
Okay.
It's not a volunteer. They are freelancers full-time, though. They're like full-time freelancers. But they do about 40 hours a week between me and each of them, between me and Foundry. And they're getting paid for it. It's not free.
I know that we paid them. I just didn't know what their exact thing is for Foundry.
Yeah, and then we have about 25, 30 artists that, I work with on a regular basis. 2 or 3 of them are practically full-time. They've never not worked with me, so they're practically full-time. And then we also have a huge volunteer staff that helps. So basically, if you add it up, 2 full-time people, probably about 10 to 15 part-time authors.
Wow.
As well as 2 who do our 5e development and conversion. And then 20, 25 artists, and then 4 VTT people. And then
that's awesome.
And then we have a lot of testers.
Yeah, and I would say that reminds me too of what I know you guys have chatted with Luke from DM's Lair.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just him and one like full-time employee, like actual employee, but they have a whole team of people that they're working with regularly too. So yeah.
I mean, this is also based off because I have my real world job of building websites, Fortune 500 websites, and my company is built this way. I explained it to Mark when I first hired him, and I'm like, I kind of built my company in this structure, and it's worked for me very well for 25 years for software development. So I said I'm just going to use the same methodology that I use for software development that I use for book development, and so far so good. I mean, it's especially now. Like when I was doing this, we were all remote. My company's all remote, and it was a little weird, like 10, 15 years ago. But now, not weird at all.
You were ahead of the curve.
Yeah, we were way ahead.
It was easier for you to get me on board with this structure than it would have been if you were using a traditional structure.
Oh, right. Like if I said you had to move to New York or something. And if anything now...
or if you didn't, you would have had to register in Washington and a bunch of other stuff.
Right. And then you actually moved away from Seattle. You're not even there anymore. Now it's
that's right. I'm on the East Coast now too.
Full circle.
Closer.
Oh, I was about to ask. Yeah, I know Steven was East Coast, and you said like New York area. But,
I'm in New York.
Where are you at, Mark?
I
Like,
was
East
in
Coast.
Redmond until like literally 8 days ago. But now I'm in Maryland.
Oh, okay. I just left Maryland.
There you go.
Yeah.
Funny, there's a lot.
That's where I was born, and it is an easier place to hang out and wait for the mortgage rates to go down or the home prices to go down, realizing that the mortgage rates are high, which they've not sort of done that yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not holding my breath on any of that to get normal, but yeah.
But it is odd.
I mean, one of them has to go down, right?
No.
I guess. I really don't know how any of that works. My wife and I live in an apartment, and we just left an apartment in Maryland, moved to an apartment in Pennsylvania because this is our home state. And in a couple of years, we'd love to get a house finally because this is the area we want to settle down. But hopefully, I don't know. I'm not like keeping track of it myself now, but her dad seems to regularly update us every once in a while with, oh, well, now they want to do this to mortgage rates and I'm like, what does that mean? And he's like, just don't rush into it.
A couple of years ago, the mortgage rates were actually extremely good. Like now they're terrible. But my little brother got a house then, and it was like lower than the interest on the savings account, so that like he was literally making money by having more of it in the mortgage than being paid off. But now they're just extremely
that was a year and a half ago, and that's never going to happen again.
I was thinking, how do we? And they're coming up with these rates on a random table.
We have a question from a super chat. Bueno Kitty for $5.50 Canadian says, "Randomness scaring people at the table. That's when GMs start fudging dice. Leave it to rolls if you're willing to live with the results." And that's a really good point that I wanted to bring up anyway, which is that fudging is part of this same topic, even though it's not what we put on the title card or anything like that. Yeah. Fudging is absolutely when the GM or the players or both, mostly the GM, especially if they do it secretly, are scared of randomness and what's going to happen, and that they have something more predetermined that they want to see. Now, admittedly, even though I don't fudge, I understand why some people do, especially when you get like really outlandish results where you're just like, you rolled 8 natural 20s in a row and it's going to demoralize your group to TPK them. But like, how can you not if you rolled 8 natural 20s in a row? And like some people do. I'm very much in favor of keeping the dice rolls as they are. If I'm going to change anything, I can like think about like the tactics that the enemies use, and maybe they get overconfident or something like that.
Yeah, the only times that I've fudged in the past, and it's a thing that I've kind of like sworn off doing now, but was to basically save characters' lives because it was just times when the enemies were just like wrecking them harder than I thought. And this, even though again, it's probably only like 3, maybe 4 occasions when this has happened, when I've been like, oh, it's, he only does this much damage, when it was like a lot more or something. Those kind of the only times that I've used it. But generally, I prefer a in-person game for this reason too, so that way everybody can just see the dice as well. I mean, I guess you could totally do that online if you're using the digital dice, of course. But yeah, I like it to just be out in the open as well.
No, it's fair. And like, I'm not trying to say that other people are playing wrong when they do fudge. And arguably, fudging may have been preferable than when I was playing in some systems that had egregious death and dying rolls. And I literally in one campaign, I think, had killed like 20 characters, and if you don't count the times they brought themselves back to life with Breath of Life, a spell that lets you bring someone back to life within one round of dying, I probably killed like low triple digit, because the dying system was in Pathfinder 1, which is based on 3rd edition, is so like strict on you that you die. Like pretty much if you go unconscious, there's a huge chance that you die. And in my fights, usually like one person would go unconscious, then my group would win. And half the time when that person went unconscious, they died, because that's just how death and dying works. So arguably, fudging may have been preferable. That's just not how I did it and not how my group liked it.
So,
Yeah. I mean, it's always going to come down to group preference.
All right, so I just wanted to say a few things. First, we had a question that has nothing to do with this, but it says, Bob, what's your favorite DCC class and why?
My favorite DCC class. Oh man, I mean, I honestly don't have enough experience with the classes themselves to say. So far, I've mostly done a lot of level 0 stuff, but I feel like the warrior is gonna be my favorite. And it's kind of funny, like maybe on the topic, you'd expect me to say wizard, because that wizard class, random magic for basically every spell. But the warrior has this really unique feature. So folks who know, but it's called Mighty Deeds of Arms, wherein there basically are very few written rules for how it works, but essentially it's along with your attack. Instead of having a flat attack bonus, the warrior rolls a deed die, and if the deed die lands on a 3 or higher, and it only starts as a D3, but if it's a 3 or higher and the attack hits, they basically get to do some kind of like called shot, or again, it's just called a mighty deed. So it could be anything. It could be, I push him down the stairs, or I, trip him, or so like the kind of battle master maneuver type things. But it's really all, DM fiat kind of style, where it's not really specified how it should work and like what exactly they can and cannot do. It's just built in there for the players to try cool things and the DM to, judge whether or not it should work.
Yeah, I actually, you and I were talking out of coincidence. I'm looking at my desk, and I have Joseph Goodman's card on my desk from Goodman Games, because my start was with Goodman Games professionally doing the DCC tournaments. And I, for whatever reason, I have an itch to, I have my book. Where is it? Oh, it was right over here somewhere. I have my itch to play some DCC, and I know you play, and so, it's right here. I'm like, where is it? It's right next to me. Right here. It's like, drop my keys. And I really want to do some funnels. I'm going to have characters and everything.
Funnel all your level 0s until they all die.
I'll run it, so I won't die. They'll die.
Oh, there you go, Steven.
But I
mean, if you were playing, you would definitely kill everyone by just running ahead and opening doors and then causing the monsters to aggro.
Well, yes and no, except I already entered a X-Crawl tournament at Origins, and I have done X-Crawl, and every time I've done X-Crawl, I've always come in the top 3. So when we play, I'm pretty serious when I play for real. Well, tournament D&D is one of those weird things that not a lot of people know how to do or have done or have experienced, but it is definitely something. If you know how to do it well, you can do it. It's not the same way as playing a regular
I've
game.
only done it once
Very
before,
different.
and I have no idea how anything in it was determined.
There's a table. Actually, I can tell as the guy who ran
did
it,
one that was like probably different because it was like a first time one, and like I just don't like, my table had both the number 1 and the number 2 player in it. And I literally do not know how that is possible based on how it seemed to be scored, because you would think, how could this table have both the number 1 and the number 2 player in it?
Okay, here's something fun. This is when you develop games. This is what you get to do. First of all, this is the Warbringer's Son, one of the only things ever designed for 4th edition, because it was so ridiculous. Like, it was the first and last thing I ever worked on for 4th edition. But there's a table back here at the end of the module that has how the scores are calculated for every single part of every room. So this room, it's like using religion to identify the eye motif, 50 points. Using perception to hear the blazing skeleton, 50 points. Discovering the secret door before it opens, 50 points. Discovering a giant skull has grooves in it.
Was that by table or by player?
This is by table.
Oh,
And
so
then-
that seems like it's easy to score. But the one I
No,
did was
look
by
how many-
player.
Oh no, we didn't. Yeah, no, it's by
And
table.
I was
It's by
just like,
table.
how could we possibly have had two players who? Because
Yeah.
we would have had to divide it, right? Like if I
Mhm.
solved the puzzle, which I did, then the other guy didn't solve that puzzle. So I
Nope.
just didn't know what was
No,
going
that's
on.
how we figured this out a while ago. So there's a way, and then you do that, and then you also get areas completed for 4, and then you get deductions. Like so every time you heal yourself, -10. Every time you use a ritual or potion, -25. Every time you use an action point, daily power, hero point, hero killed, things like that. You -400 if you die.
So
Things
when
like
you
that.
do a module like this,
Mhm.
is there a GM
Yeah.
and a separate scorekeeper?
No, it's the
or
same
is
person. Same person.
Yeah, that'd be a lot to keep track of. I feel
It's not
like.
that bad.
I don't
It's
know.
a-
I
it's
guess if you know the score sheet
Yeah.
pretty well,
Yeah. I mean, we were all recommend. Put it this way: there's 3 rounds, and all of us who either helped develop it or play tested it did rounds 2 and 3. So they usually
Okay.
got the better GMs, or at least the ones who were more
That makes
familiar with
sense.
it. I
The
am
one I
looking
was doing was really weird.
Mhm.
They were also judging the GMs at the same time. And like I got pretty disillusioned because even though our table did great, like I came in second, we had the first place person, but one of the GMs who was at that was one of the worst GMs I've ever seen in my entire life. And
In
our
what
whole table
ways?
gave him terrible scores, but he came in first for the GMs. So I was like,
Huh.
what? First of all, we had good GMs at all of the other tables because we moved around to different GMs. And second of all, how did this happen? Is this even just made up? Like, I know we all gave that GM like completely the lowest score possible because he was just like literally cheating and not following the rules. Like the tournament forced it into a PvP between 2 tables at the end, and that's when we had this guy. And he was literally cheating for the other group that was not our group in like a variety of ways. And then
Wow.
after doing something that was blatantly illegal, he was like, he had a quote that like our table now continues to use, which is like, we were like, this is not what monsters can do. Like you just moved and then made all these attacks and did this other thing. You can only do some of those. And he was like, I have multi-attack, which is an ability in that campaign that in that system that limits the penalty for making lots of attacks from -5 to -2. And literally has nothing to do with it. So whenever anybody just does something wrong at the table, and you'd be like, "Wait a minute, you shouldn't have been able to do that," and then at our table would just like, "I have multi-attack."
I love that.
I'm looking at this. I have this rule where all names have to be easy to say and spell. So I
Mhm.
made the NPCs for the adventure, and listen to these. These are you'll like this, Mark. So we
Okay.
have Blood Song of the Dark. That one.
That's easy to say and spell. I still think Vaughn actually isn't.
You're right. That one's a little tricky, but
Okay.
it's a friend of mine.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Clapper Off is my friend Bob. So do you have friends that go by one name in everything? Like, like every name of their characters in every MMO, in every game they play, in every online message board. Like that's their name, like everywhere.
I think Klaproth is not as easy to spell. There's a
No.
lot of ways you could spell
It's
Klaproth.
correct. He can spell it 10,000 ways, but it is Klaproth because it's my friend Bob Marquis, and I named it after him. We have Norse.
And does he do it like a different spelling of it for everything that he does? Is that
Yes.
what
Well, what
you're getting
happened
at?
is when he dies, sometimes he would then make it right. He spells it with 1 R or 2 R's or 1
Oh,
P.
so
or
it's just
2
the
P.
reincarnated of
Yes.
the same character?
Yes, he does that all the time.
Wow, that
But-
reminds me of one of my players who just kept making the same cleric of Shellen in every time, in every campaign, and if the character died. So they were sisters, apparently. It was Ilana and
Wow.
Laren and Elena and Lauren, and they were just like almost the exact same name,
Yeah.
but very slightly different.
So then we have Norse Backbreaker, who was actually a follower in one of our campaigns. We have Kizzy Zendra, because I like Z's. Rojan Redjack, which is Chris Beamer. Like, he used to always go by Rojan for like 20 years. And then the stupidest one of all is Tordok Estron, who's the paladin healer. Tordok Estron is Dr. Nurse, spelled backwards. So
Okay. There you go.
Would have got by me, I think.
I was
Yeah,
like,
I didn't think of that. If I saw it written out,
if you saw it
maybe.
written
Right.
out. Well, here's the
Yeah.
crazy part. We ran Age of Worms, and I only had 3 players. So Bob was forced to make a 4th player, and so he made his character, who he called the Gun, because he just made like a sorcerer because it's super easy. He called him he called him another one. He made Healer, and he called him Tordok because no one wanted to play the healer, so they the extra character be the healer, and then his main character was a gun because it was easy. And Tordok was the healer, and that was great. And then after like playing with him for like 3 years, I said, "What's the last name of Tordok?" Because we needed first and last name, and he goes Esrun. I'm like, "What does this mean?" He goes, "Steve, you know Tordok is doctor backwards, right?" And I'm like, no. it's like, dude, I've been using that name for 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I just named it Tordok because he's the doctor, and I just had to come up with a name. And Esron is nurse. And I was like, you're an idiot.
There you go.
So
So we had a few people saying some things in chat. Like somebody said that Bob asked what the third to last of something is, and they said it's the anti-penultimate, which is totally.
I saw that. I think that's in reference to a podcast episode that I did on my second channel. The thing is, like, I have a second YouTube channel called Bob's RPG Radio that is just for like longer form stuff, and eventually I do kind of want to start streaming on that channel or something too. But right now it's pretty much been hosting these old Patreon podcast episodes that, you know, for a couple of years were just Patreon exclusive, but then I slowly started releasing them there just because they were out for so long. I think in one of the final episodes of that original podcast, we were wondering what to call it because it was all wishy-washy. We didn't know what was going to be the last one, so we were just like, it's probably in the last couple. Because now we have a new podcast on the same channel, but just under a different name that actually has a structure and everything. So yeah. So that is a deep cut though.
So
it's a very deep cut.
So wait, I wanted to go back to the main
point
the topic of randomness.
Well, we always
topic.
well, that's the problem. Because we go on, we always if it's not a roll for combat show, if we don't go off on tangents, that's
especially if
maybe we're on
randomness.
I know.
I was about to say, I think we're we got away with it here. We're always on topic.
I see a cool thing in chat talking about 1d20 versus like 3d6 or 2d10.
Well, I don't even want to talk about
variant.
that. I think I'm not even. You see, I don't want to get into the minutia of role types. I think that's important. Let's get past the concept itself because that's
okay.
You just have to get people even comfortable with randomness, let alone I don't think anyone's going to be like, well, I'll use a 2d6 random to encounter table instead of 1d20. Is that better? No one's going to care.
I actually agree with Bob on that. I think it's a really good idea, so that you don't have like the. Like there's famous if you've played any like published adventure that have really wide random encounter charts. Kingmaker, since that was a big Kickstarter for Paizo, notorious in the original version as like there was a shambling mound that was just on the random encounter table for first level, and if you roll that and you don't run away right away because they're not very fast, you will die against a shambling mound at first level. And so if you use multiple dice so that it's much more likely to roll in the center, and the shambling mound is like really, really unlikely because you'd have to roll, let's say, this have more entries on it than 2d6 or 1d20. So let's say you rolled like 10d6 and the shambling mound is only if it's like 58 or above. Like the probability of that is basically nothing. So you don't have to worry about it, but it's still technically there.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I'll say is there's not less randomness in Pathfinder 2nd. There's a ton. In fact, there's probably more randomness in Pathfinder than 2nd edition than any other game I've played because of the, critical success, critical failure tables. So you always have 4 possibilities for almost anything you do, as opposed to any other game where it's usually just 1 or 2. And let me tell you a story. All right, we're going to sit back a little. So the last 2 or 3 weeks, this has come up with my games more than any other time in my existence. So I'm running 2 games and they're both level 14. And both games they continuously were rolling critical failures. Now, this is an example of how this is built into the game. Like, this is not you picking from the deck of many things. This is not you picking from the Harrow deck or Rod of Wonder. This is just part of the game. And as many people know, it's like, okay, critical success, awesome. Success, great. Failure, not great, but usually livable. But critical failures on spells are really, really, really bad. Like, they are game breaking. And at level 14, when they're casting 9th level spells and you're critically failing, you're getting hundreds of damage, getting 100 hit points of damage, plus slowed, plus sicken 4. It is destruction. It is very bad. And for whatever reason, both of my games are on the very last encounter. They're up against the main boss. These are like epic level fights, and they are getting their asses handed to them. They're just getting ripped to pieces. In fact, I said it last week, and Derek Melenda from Knights of Last Call said nothing summarizes a D&D game better than what I might get a picture made of this. They were fighting a halfling, a little old halfling with a Harrow deck, which is already random. And they took parts of the deck and they started to rip up the cards, which made him go insane. And then he cast level 9 spells, which they critically failed. Then he cast Baleful Polymorph on them, which they also critically failed. So they knew they were going to die, and it was about to be DPK. And so a tiefling orc is running away while there's a halfling crying, trying to put together his torn up Harrow cards, while this tiefling halfling is dragging a dead Tengu with one hand. In his other arm, he has a dead rabbit, who was one of the characters who got polymorphed. Another rabbit who was kicking and screaming, who was also Baleful Polymorph, both critically failed. And he dragged them out of the fight, and they managed to live for another day. That was some of the most fun I've ever had. My characters loved it. They loved it, even though they almost all died. Yeah. And it is like, we're never going to forget that fight. And it's because they failed, not because they succeeded.
You want a way to fail forward. If you're going to put randomness in your game, I think this is very important. If you're going to lean into randomness, you absolutely cannot have the randomness just like derail or stop things, right? If you have like the cliff of climbing, and it's like, okay, roll to see if you climb the cliff of climbing, and at the top is the castle that you're going to. It's like, there's absolutely nothing interesting about the idea that failing the check might mean you didn't climb the cliff and didn't get to the castle. But you could be like, okay, you got up, but it took several additional hours. You fell a few times and like stabbed yourself on the rocks and took some damage. And like the evil dragon who lives in the castle completely saw you because you were just like completely flailing about climbing up, as opposed to success where you get up quickly and quietly and you don't take damage or something like that. But either way, people want to go to the castle. So it's just like, there's no point in putting in the randomness as the GM who has control over what the randomness can do in many cases, if it's going to just mean that there is no game to play. And so I think rather than like cheat the dice rolls or like fudge those, I think you could set the terms of engagement so that you're going to get something interesting, hopefully, no matter what, unless it's that one card from the deck of many things that just kills your character. Okay, fine. That's usually not great for the person.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that the big difference between OSR games and DCC is that, and first edition D&D, the tables were unfair. Okay, they're literally unfair. There's like, you roll this, you die. You roll this, you die. Yep. You roll this, you explode. You roll this.
Sometimes you didn't even need dice to die in those things. Yeah. It would just be like, oh, I said you said you were checking for traps, but you didn't say you were checking under the rug. So therefore, when you walked into the room, the thing that was under the rug kills you. Do I get a death save? No. Mm-hmm. You're dead. You didn't check under the rug. I've seen that before.
I had the famous GM. This wasn't my game, but I heard about this game, is where there was a party and they were walking through a hall in a dark hall, and then they're like, "Oh, your character's dead." And it's like, "What do you mean my character's dead?" It's like they died. And like what really happened is a trap went off and no one knows and they didn't detect it, so they just died. And again, they're like, and then another character went, and they died. And I'm like, that's the problem with having bad randomness or bad failing forward. And that's the difference between Pathfinder Second Edition and these OSR games, which are designed to kill you. Like they are designed to be unfair. If you play Monster Kingdom Death, it's designed to be unfair. A lot of these games are, and that's fine because that's what you're buying into. You're gonna die. You're playing DCC Classics. You're gonna have your level 0 characters, 90% of them die. And that's what you expect that, so it's okay. But if you're 14th level and you've been playing a campaign for 4 years or 3 years, you better expect there should be no instant deaths. And if there is, there shouldn't be, actually. I'm just going to say there shouldn't be. But there should be pain and consequence, because if there is no threat of failure, there is no conflict. And if there is no conflict, there is no game. And there's no stakes. And there will be no fun. Trust me on this.
Yeah.
This is like Gaming 101. I've been to a million seminars on this and game design, GDC, game development conferences, and things like this. Like that is the concept of script writing. That's the concept of game development. It's like you need conflict and you need stakes. And if you don't have that, you're going to be bored out of your mind. And it might seem like fun for a little while where you're power gaming and killing everything. But after a while, it will get samey, which is why at this point of my gaming career, we like random tables because we've seen and done it all. Like we want things to be mixed up for us. We want craziness because we've seen it all, you know? So at this point, we need the unseen to really make these games fun for us. I'm talking too much, but you can go on, Bob.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that's something that had like drew me to DCC was the magic system, in that it involves a lot of randomness and it involves consequences. Because with starting off more or less with 5e, like I started off with, really it was like a totally homebrewed kind of version of D&D that we all just sort of made up so we know what we were doing. But then really cut my teeth on 5e, and eventually just realizing how with magic it's supposed to be this like supernatural otherworldly force that's like being manipulated. And yes, if you're like a wizard or something, you've studied for years to be able to do this, but especially with something like cantrips, how they can always be so predictable, it just didn't feel quite right to me. So I like how in DCC, for example, like every spell, first of all, there's just spell checks to see if it works. And then if it works, there's this whole range of possibilities each time. And some of those possibilities, are negative things that can, basically mutate your character in strange ways. And that, adds to their story, and it's stuff that you wouldn't have probably wanted to do to yourself. But now you have this interesting story. There's something this character went through. So I like it for that reason. Especially related to magic, I guess, which I feel like should be more random.
Yeah, and so someone wrote here and says they played Shadow Dark last night. One of my players rolled a character with 1 hit point and a negative con, no chance. Well, Scott S., let me tell you a little story that I was playing first edition D&D, and I did my random table, and I rolled, and I got a strength of a 4 and 1 hit point. But my intelligence was like a 15 or 16. So I became a wizard. Let me tell you, that character made it up to level 5. And at level 5, I think I had 5 hit points, by the way. And you're wondering, how can a wizard make it to level 5 with 5 hit points and a 4 strength, which means I literally could barely carry my robes, is because in first edition D&D, you can hire minions. And I had an army of minions that would surround me at all times. There were human shields, and I was always in the rear with the gear. So by the time I was there, I had something like 12 minions, torchbearers, with me at all times. And they were carrying all my stuff. They would be good in front of me if there was a fight. They'd die willingly to protect me. And that's one of my most memorable characters. And that's the other thing, is that having flaws and having bad things happen is way more memorable than winning. Let me tell you, you're gonna forget those wins.
And you're bringing up some really good points though, because like I haven't read the whole Shadow Dark PDF yet, but I'm almost certain that somewhere in there must be rules for not only henchmen, hiring hirelings, whatever you want to call it, but also morale, which these two elements are parts of pretty much every OSR game that I've read. Hiring henchmen and rolling the morale of enemies. And those things can also insulate you from some of these easy deaths, which are otherwise way more common. Because not only do you have these like meat shields that you're hiring to go in front of your 1 hit point wizard, but you also have the enemies sometimes being, shocked and fleeing when half of their forces depleted instead of always fighting to the death every single time. So yeah, these games do have some balance built in for that, I think, for the deadliness.
Well, they do, because one of the things that everyone forgets, like having only 3 or 4 PCs, that's kind of a new thing. If you look at the Tomb of Horrors in the back, they have pre-generated PCs for you, and the party is they recommend 16 to 20 PCs.
For when you die to just the arbitrary capricious stuff that just instantly kills you.
Right. So
you could easily lose all of them if people think that the the sphere of annihilation is a portal that they're going through. It's like, well, I'll send my next character to this portal. I was saying,
because that's the perfect example of like, oh, you don't know what happened, you just died.
Right.
Because there's no way to tell what happened, even for the other characters watching in that case. They might not really realize what's happening.
But I think that's why people are more scared of randomness, because now you have one character. So it's very
more risky.
Right. It's very risky. Like back in those days, you had 20 characters, or you'd have 3, or you would literally run 3 or 4 PCs at a time. And they would just die, and then you just replace them. I mean, it just was part of the game. So, but I will say, another good story I have. So I love randomness. Okay, I'm Mr. Randomness. I'm the guy who will play every random character. You name it. So in our Starfinder podcast, and this is a bit of a spoiler, is that we had one of our guys, he's what was the pet class? The mechanic. He was a mechanic, and he had Cheddar. He was a Yosoki rat, so his robot was named Cheddar, like cheese. So anyhow, his Cheddar got destroyed and was rebuilt by goblins, so he had goblin parts in him. But you know who designed Cheddar, Mark? Is what's his name from Paizo? I can't remember. But he designed Cheddar for us, and he made a random table. So whenever there was something we called the button. So whenever you pressed the button, you just press the button, and you rolled a 1d20 and something happened, right? So it was like the Cheddar button, and he would always press it because it was never that bad. It was never that big of a deal. It was always something, So eventually, when they got up to like 13th, 14th level, and Cheddar died a couple more times, we rebuilt Cheddar to the point he was like version 8 or 9. And then what I did is I made a table, and it was 1d100. I made a 1d100 table, right? So here's what happened. They are ready for the final fight. They know they're going to the final fight for the entire campaign, okay? The entire campaign. So what do? Is they sit there and they prepare, and they spend hours figuring out how they're going to do, what they're going to do, what potions they're going to drink, what spells they're going to cast. So they're getting ready. And what they were going to do was open up the door, and then we're going to have Cheddar go in and like start drawing the fire, and then they were going to spill in after him and like go crazy. And they were going to press the button on top of it. And so what do? So they, after hours and hours of planning, the doors open up, they press the button, they do the roll for combat, then they press the button, and they roll a 1. And they're like, what does that mean, Steve? And I go, well, this is what you hear. It's like, self-destruct will initiate in 6 seconds. And they're like, are you kidding me? They're like, that's what you hear. Start the combat. And then everything went to hell. And that was the very first thing. And we still remember because they're like, come on, really? I was like, dude, you could have, there's only a 1% chance of it self-destructing, and you got it, baby. And sure enough, it was like, like a level 9 fireball. It was bad. And they're like, oh my God, run away. Like then instead of them running in to charge at the enemy, they're running in to get away from Cheddar. And madness. You see, randomness. Like, what else you would not have that story? Okay, and it was crazy.
Yeah, well, and I like how what you're saying is, especially after like a long career of gaming, like I'm sure you have, it's at the point where you only get that level of excitement when it's something that nobody expects. Correct. Because you've done so much and you've seen so many things. So it's like the randomness is kind of like the last hope for having those surprises at the table. And like, yes, like we're still using dice that, for every little thing, like all the stuff we're used to, but introducing, again, this is like somebody's homemade kind of wacky table for stuff that happens when you push this button on this familiar pet, whatever. And that's the only way you kind of bake it into a lot of these games, or put it into a lot of these games, because they don't have it baked in already is what I mean by that, with DCC maybe as one of the few exceptions.
Yeah, but randomness you shouldn't be scared of randomness, like, ever, because you can you can get away with it. And if you have a good, I'd have to say you also need a good GM, because if a GM is good at rolling with the punches and not being able to like kill your characters outright, and things like that. I mean, you can have a nasty GM who just like, oh, you rolled this, so you're dead, and that's it. Like, well, you don't have to. And that's not even fudging, because I see people, like, someone's in their chat said, oh, they fudged it because they're playing with 10-year-olds. Dude, you're playing with 10-year-olds, fudge. Like, I'm going to say you should fudge, because that's not the point in the game. The point of the game is not to kill off the 10-year-olds. The point of the game is for the 10-year-olds to have fun. Okay,
Steven, you and I are both anti-fudge, and we both told that person in chat, when it's with 10-year-olds, you know what, you do it different.
Oh yeah, that's a very. In fact, do you remember this, Mark? They used to have Pathfinder Society at Gen Con for families.
They had the academy,
right? I used to run that.
Linda
too.
was part of getting that set up.
Okay, well, I used to run games for the academy, and the academy games were specifically made for kids and people getting into it, and you had to be much more gentle and had to design the games for them to have fun and be challenging but not deadly. And there's a big difference between the two.
I mean, there's some games that are indie games that are just made specifically with kids in mind, in a way that makes it easier for kids to get into them. And some of them, I think, teach like better habits for role playing for kids than playing in like a system like D&D or Pathfinder and fudging, which I admit you should fudge with little kids rather than just letting them get killed off. But games like Mouse Guard, that's based on Burning Wheel, where in order to level up, I mean, they don't have levels, but to like get stronger, you have to get a certain number of successes and failures with the skill. And so that teaches the kid that failing is good, because if all they did was succeed on it, they would never get the power up. And it has a very robust fail forward system as well that is helpful for that. So I feel like that's probably better than teaching them, no, you have to succeed or else bad things will happen, or you will, the game will crawl to a halt, but somehow you're always succeeding, because then they're just going to get set up to be upset whenever the kid gloves come off and you play for real and you don't fudge. It's like, wait a minute, now it's not fun. I always used to succeed at everything.
Yeah, that's a really cool mechanic. The level, advancing, you say, by failing and succeeding. That's interesting.
So Eric S. Riley said for $5, my favorite randomness is when the stars align. Like when the table says giant spiders, then a fight can be diffused with diplomacy because the PC is a naughty, which I believe is the spider ancestry.
Yes, the spider. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean,
and so they can talk to the spider.
Right. Oh, that happens all the time. I mean, that's the other randomness is that randomness is stars align. All right, how about this for randomness? The last adventure, I've told the story before, the very, very last adventure ever for our 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons game, we're fighting on a volcano and we're fighting some dragon. and this is like super insane. And I've never seen this happen, but like every single roll was like a crit. It was insane. Like we were rolling all 20s, everyone. It was like the stars were aligned. The stars weren't aligned. Luck was being warped that night. Like I've never seen rolls like that. And then Chris Beamer like punches a dragon, kills it, and then falls into the volcano. And Seth is like, "Okay, your character's dead." He goes, "No." Chris is like, "No. There's got to be a ledge. There's got to be something. I have to be able to land on like a piece of lava. There's got to be a way." And then after he goes, "Fine, roll a 1d100. And if you roll 100, you'll land on like a solid piece of lava." He rolls it. He gets 100. And we're like, you see? And he couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, wow. And we're like, fine. He survives. And I was like, that is why you need it. Because that happens for some reason more often than it should. It just does.
It's just fun. You remember the times that it happened like that. Another interesting super chat, Aaron Mortar says reincarnation is a great random spell. That's definitely true. Like we had in that same Kingmaker game, there was so much random stuff that was constantly going on because Linda had random tables of events and other things. But we had this really, really old high-level cleric who was able to cast spells like resurrections or things if we needed them. And he had moved over to the area. He was from like a very traditionalist church of Erastil, the farming deity, who like the people who worship that deity in our kingdom had issues with like the urban, very chaotic because it's a lawful church. People who were like moving into the area as we built more settlements. And this guy was approaching the end of his life, but he had realized that dangers were coming in the adventure path. So he decided to get a reincarnation from our party druid, and he was reincarnated as a female gnome. And gnomes in Pathfinder are constantly seeking out new experiences and doing stuff because otherwise they'll like bleach and turn white and die. And so it was a big adjustment for that NPC, and it all happened because the reincarnation table just said, "Oh yeah, you're now a female gnome."
Reincarnation tables are great. We had a character. It was actually a follower, and she was a half elf, and everyone hated her. And then she died, and they reincarnated her. They're like, "Okay, let's roll up the table and see what she comes back as." And she came back as a half elf. And we're like, "Come on, really?"
But the other half is elf this time.
Right. It was like, but your other half's the elf. And they're like, "Oh," and they were like, "Fine." But that's again, it's like I can remember all my random table stories, all of them. Like the time when we had the deck of many things and Chris decided to pull 2 cards, and then he got the card that you roll to see how many more cards you pull. Remember, you have to roll another 1d4 and you pull that many extra cards, and you have to pull them. And then he pulled. I was like, "Oh no!" Oh my gosh! You said you wanted to pull from it, Random tables are great, man, and randomness is good. You want randomness in your game. What about you? I mean, we're telling stories. Do you have any stories like these, or not really?
You're reminding me of literally when I ran my home group now through like the famous DCC funnel over here, Sailors on the Starless Sea. One of the guys, it's funny because he kept using my friend's die, like another friend's die, which was this like fancy D20 he got that was filled with some kind of like liquid or whatever. And at the beginning of the session, we're like, "Oh wow, that's really cool! Like never seen anything like that." And then he's always using that one. And whenever he used the die, he was critting and critting and critting again and again. And he's just mainly playing, one of his like focusing on one of his 4 level 0 like peasant nobodies. But this one peasant was just being so heroic throughout the session. And that's the kind of thing that, of course, that wasn't even like a random table scenario. But then at the very end, similar to what you described, he basically like sacrificed himself to save another character. And he, with some like death-defying like dive in front of them, basically to block a spell. And and everybody at the table was like, we can't have this guy die. Like, is there anything we could do to make sure he survives too, even though he's kind of sacrificing himself here? So I said, roll the D20. If you crit again, they live. And that time he didn't crit. So it was, again, this just example of you don't know what's going to happen. Like, even when you think you're on a roll like that, the dice are still the dice. And I feel that's kind of why we play. That's what I was going to come in and say is, we all like love the randomness to one degree or another. We started this conversation saying like, like players maybe, don't like it as much because they want things to be more predictable, have more control, especially if they're only that one character, like everything's invested in that one character. But ultimately, we are all playing these dice games where, we are wanting ourselves to be subject to this randomness to some degree. Otherwise, we could all just be sitting and talking and not rolling any dice,
Yeah,
For sure. I don't know. I love randomness. And as I said, it's to the point that if you don't have some random element, and I have a problem with those storytelling games, games like that. It's like the problem with those games is like you're literally just talking and telling stories, which is fine, but you also have to think about who you are, because like in my table, when we role play for more than about an hour, they're just like, okay, enough talk. Where's the fight? Like they just want, want to fight. Like that's why they came here. They'll take about an hour of role playing and then they go all Conan. They're like, enough talk. And that's it, But if you have people, if you're playing with kids or you're playing with friends who just are really new to it and they don't want to see or they also don't have the experience of like, if they might be so consumed, that's something else. They might be so consumed with the role of the failure, that they can't play effectively anymore, that they don't they don't roll with it. They literally are paralyzed that you have to know your audience. And that's another big thing. It's like, if you're playing with people that are new or don't want to do that, then don't do that. Don't force them. Or if you do, maybe you do fudge a little, just to make it a more fun experience for them. Because I don't know how many times I've played with people, especially in the last couple of years, or especially before D&D got really big, and they all said, oh yeah, I played D&D and we all died and it sucked. Or I played D&D and the guy was like, a bad DM and it sucked. And I hear a lot of those stories. And I'm like, yeah, that's why the first couple times you need to just have fun and not worry so much about the rules and worry so much about the randomness. I'm talking about people who have played, literally my friends have played for 40 years, like they like it on super extra, super duper hard mode. Like they are like the worse, the better, they are looking for challenge. They're looking to have challenges and they're looking to see failure and they're looking to see how to overcome it, and that's who they are. Trust me, 20 years ago, they were not like this. I guarantee. I know they weren't. I was playing with them back then, and they would complain. They were power gamers, and they would complain, and they would whine when things like this happened. Now they're just like, that's the, they're like, that's it. That's the roll of the dice. Like that's the way it goes, And that's just also something about how you play. But you seem to be a little bit of a luck taker if you're like DCC. Are you a gambler, Bob? Do you like the table games?
Not literally.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. But it's funny because like to go back to, I'm talking about playing with my home group, who I call my home group. It's just like a couple of my best friends who we've been friends forever. We only started playing these games. Actually, again, it was like 2015. So 8 years now. I always want to say 5 years in my head, but it actually keeps getting longer than that, of course. And when we started playing, so I alluded to this before, we had the 5e Player's Handbook. My DM had this book. He had like been a player in one other like mini campaign before that, but none of us like knew what we were doing. And from the get-go, like pretty much every class was homebrewed. We used like races out of the book, but he like helped us just like, if you were a spellcaster, we like made up what the spells did together and then just wrote it on the sheet. If you had a magic item, we like, you just made it up together, and maybe like, okay, yeah, like this thing in the book, but we'll do this and that. Like it was all homebrew from the beginning. And so that's why I'm saying it was only then like really that friend who was that DM, and then myself who really went on to like, okay, let's like read more of these books and like got into the actual rules and, and like my journey with the hobby kind of changed that way. But the rest of the group, like they all have continued to play the same way, and they don't play as often either. But like when we get together and like have those sessions still, that's how it is. So for me now, like cycling through like a bit of a power gaming phase, and then wanting my character to be really powerful, wanting like all the group, like the players to like really think about their character builds or whatever. Like I kind of like went through all that, I feel like pretty quickly, and then have emerged back on the other side of, yeah, I just kind of want to go back to everything being a little wacky and we just make it up, and because it's just easier that way.
What do you
for me at least, like prepping and playing? Yeah.
What do you play mostly? Like you play 5e. Have you played Pathfinder 2nd edition yet? Or
I've never played any Pathfinder yet. No.
He's still my beating heart.
Yeah.
We have the co-creator of the rules right here with Mark. I bet you he'd be happy to run you through a game.
Yeah. I was meaning.
I'd be happy too.
Yeah, I was meaning to pick up the like starter box set, around the time when I was pushing for like Pathfinder and DCC, because I mean, like I had already kind of invested in DCC myself, but obviously I know Pathfinder's like the closest analogy, a lot of people say, like to 5e, for people who might want to switch to a new system or just try a new system, whatever. Because it kind of stemmed from like they have the same ancestor, you could put it that way.
They have a DCC common ancestor. Yes,
kissing cousins.
Yeah. They all do. But Pathfinder and 5e are more closely related, more closer cousins in that way.
Because DCC, even though it came during OGL time, was harkening back more to the even older editions, whereas Pathfinder developed through more iterations and came from 3rd edition. So, it's very interesting genealogies.
Yeah, it's funny because actually even DCC is based on the same version of the OGL that Pathfinder 1e was, I believe. Correct. I think they're both on the first OGL. But of course, DCC used it, and like as other OSR games did, just use that OGL to really pull stuff from previous editions of the game.
Backwards as far as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I forget where we're going with that like question or whatever now. But I've never played Pathfinder yet. Right. Yeah, so recently I've been like dabbling a lot, but Pathfinder's like the one I still have yet to touch for whatever reason. It was just I've played, some DCC is like kind of the main one, and I'm trying to get my home campaign going. It's just been like scheduling kerfuffles really. But recently with one shots, I've played this zine that I made a video about called Skate Wizards. I've played some index card RPG. I've played Cairn, which I just also made a video about. It's another like short zine game that's based on like Maze Rats and Knave kind of. I played a little Easy D6. And of course I played like Call of Cthulhu. Trying to think of what else. I'd have to like go look at my other shelf, but
interesting.
For whatever reason, it's just nobody in my circles has played Pathfinder either. So when I wanted to get the starter set box, when I went to my store, it was around the time when it was sold out. Like everything was gone off the shelf.
They should have
and then I just didn't go back. Oh yeah, I'm sure it's back now. But actually, that's another thing. So when I moved, where we lived in Maryland, we were in really close to Newark, Delaware, and Newark, Delaware.
Which county of Maryland?
It was Cecil County.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So Newark, Delaware has this awesome game store called Days of Nights. I don't know if anybody out there is listening, wants to check it out. It's just, compared to where I live now, and again, this is kind of the area I grew up in, there's not really any like great local TTRPG game stores. Things are more on the, comic book side, or more on the like just Magic the Gathering, or even like miniatures and Warhammer and stuff, but not so much with like various tabletop books and systems and stuff. But Days of Nights in Maryland like had anything you could want D&D, including an extremely impressive collection of used like old edition materials. So like that's like I have a copy. It's not like up where you can see it right here, but I have a copy of like Keep on the Borderlands, like the print module, that's from the 70s, whatever, and a copy of Into the Unknown, like some of the original ones that came in those box sets and stuff, because for whatever, I don't know if the owners of this game store would buy them on eBay or something and then just put them up, but they have this wide collection of stuff that was available there. But right now where I am, the game stores around here just don't have a lot of tabletop stuff, unfortunately, unless I just haven't found the one. So
that's too bad. I guess you could order it online.
But that's going to be the next go-to, is getting it online.
Yeah.
Then you could do one. A lot of people were having success with videos where it's like comparing the beginner box to like the D&D 5e box. I've seen that on a bunch of channels, and they
not
tend
much
to
of a comparison.
It seems like there's no comparison at all.
There is
Pathfinder.
There is.
Actually just gives you everything you could want.
Well, it's not even that.
It makes it for a good video. It's like this one has more things, and this other one is cheaper.
It's phenomenally better, and it's also the quality. Like the D&D box, they use really. I mean, they've been doing this with their books too. It's like as someone who now produces products for a living, like let them have it. I look and I see the type of paper, the quality of the paper they use, the type of binding, and they are really getting cheap. And let me tell you, it matters, man, especially for a beginner's box, because this is someone you're trying to get a first impression and get them into the hobby, and you're putting out these crappy boxes with thin paper.
So I'm going to devil's advocate that. Because while I definitely agree that having the high quality stuff is good, and like, look, my name's on the cover of the Pathfinder beginner box. Okay, I won't lie. One that I worked on, and one that I wonder
if he's biased there. Continue.
But
continue.
This is my devil's advocate for Wizards, which is that sticker shock is real, and
I completely agree.
Wizards were able to make their box dirt cheap.
It's very cheap. It's very cheap.
And there are a wide variety of people who probably won't buy that Pathfinder box, even though I maintain that the value is extremely high for how much content is in there and the quality of everything that is in that box. But by making the content very low quality, like you said, Steven, it also made it cheaper. And
I know, but there's
that's my devil's advocate. Okay,
I know,
that's the beginning and the end of that.
I know, but there's a level that you can't go below. Like, for example, and I'll actually ding on Pathfinder a little. So the Pathfinder books, I'll tell you why. They use a 60 GM. It's like 60-pound weight for their paper, which is the thinnest paper you can get with full color printing. And if you put it up to light, you can see through the paper. That's the thinnest paper. Now, it is a little cheaper than the 70 or 80-pound stock, but I also have to admit, they print up a lot of books. And when you're printing up a lot of books, that starts to add up very quickly, the type of paper you have, especially the number of books they print up. So I can see why they go with the 60-pound paper as opposed to, like, I don't print up that many books, so I go with the super high gloss gold 80-pound stock, which is the nicest you can buy, and it's more expensive, but I don't print as many books, so my books have to be really good. But then you have D&D who they made it cheap, but at what cost? Right?
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to argue that the cost benefit. I'm just saying, I'm sure that Paizo would love to be able to make a product that is as cheap as that.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
still has
really
good
cheap
content in it that meets the quality standards of Paizo. But at the end of the day, when forced to choose, Paizo doesn't want to put out something that doesn't meet the standard qualities of Paizo, even if that means some people are going to pass it up. And I think that says something to, like, Paizo's core values of product. It has to be a certain level of quality.
Yeah, but now WotC's actually putting out expensive books, and they're still poor quality because they want to make more money.
Right.
So
I mean, I'm not
that's what I would say here is like how the more I've looked into some other smaller systems, I'll say, where really it's like and you could kind of put DCC in this vein, like not so much, but a lot of these other systems, like, it's just one book. And so that one book is made very well. Whereas, with a company like Wizards of the Coast or even like Paizo, when they're producing so much, you can see why they can't use the highest, or why they don't, I guess, use the highest quality for everything. Of course, a company like Wizards of the Coast, you think they could probably afford to do it, especially like you're saying with even the binding, like the stitch versus the glue and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's something that I've become more aware of, not as a print publisher myself, but just as I've gotten more books from different publishers over the last really just couple of months, that it's accelerated a lot. But yeah.
Well, the thing with the WotC books, they make a lot of money on those books, because I know how cheap. I mean, these books are probably thinking. I'm like, let me see. I can guess how many pages is this. No, but there doesn't have an insert. This actually, okay. This one's not bad. The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. This is probably their best book, in terms of quality. So 552 pages. They don't have. I'm just looking at how they built this book, and this probably came out to $3.50, maybe $4 a book. Well, plus this. So okay, with this in the back, I'd say $4. So I'll guess $4 a book for these, maybe $3.50 per book
for the cost of the printing.
Just to print this book,
basically,
to print this book. And then with shipping, maybe $4. So maybe even less. So I'll say about $3.50 to $4 per book. And what do they sell this for? They sell it for $50, but keep in mind, they sell it to stores for $25, $20 to $25, so they're only really making $15 per book, which is why, hey, we're going all digital because we make 100% on that. So
yeah, I remember that was like a main topic in one of your other streams that I watched probably a week or two ago.
The main topic of every stream, like why they're going all digital. It's like, it's simple math. It's like, okay.
But just, that exact, those like same words, I think, came out of your mouth about how it's like, it's just so, it's practically free for them to put it out and keep selling it. And then especially if it's like a subscription base. So we don't have to go down that whole
we don't have to go down
again. I'm sure everybody's heard it ad nauseum now. But,
I know. And it'll come back up. It's funny is, because we're maybe a year or half a year ago, we're the only ones saying that. And I've watched every stream says that now. Everyone has been convinced.
Because it's true now.
Well, it's true now, right?
But it's becoming more true by the day. We still haven't quite seen the full shift, full tilt digital, but it's coming.
It's coming.
I think the books will stay for collectors.
They're going to keep doing books. Of course they're going to keep doing books, but that's not where they're going to make. They're going to end up, you know what? I think of it as the DVD Netflix model, because remember Netflix way back when.
Yeah, they would send you
they were DVDs
in the mail.
They'd be like, don't go to Blockbuster. Right. You have to go to Blockbuster. Right. We'll send it to you in the mail.
I remember them saying, why is it called Netflix? Is because the future is we're going to be streaming stuff over the internet. And this is back in the 90s. And I'm like, you guys are crazy. That's never going to happen. I was like, dude, just when we were using like dial-up mode, I was like, there's no way you're going to be streaming movies through the internet, because there wasn't even video in the internet as we're talking now, by the way. It's like, there's not going to happen. And then slowly but surely, and then, now, in fact, they're killing off their DVD division. And it's the same thing. It's like, I can see that in 20 years, they're going to be like, what's that you have? What's this book? It'll be so rare. It's like showing a DVD to a kid. It's like, what's that? What's a VHS tape? Man.
I mean, the thing, I guess, it's hard to say, because even with you think of like how pervasive, I don't know, it's kind of it's like a whole different world, but I'm thinking of how pervasive like audiobooks are today, but it's like books have survived, like people are still buying books. They're still going to the library. Even with all these other ways that you can, access a book today. But with something like an RPG book, that is more of like a reference material, if you think of it that way, it's like probably one of the closest things that I can relate it to is like when I was in, grad school studying earth science, professors didn't get the physical, journal of nature or whatever anymore. It's like everything's just digital because it's just reference materials. So for games, it probably makes more sense for these companies to just go digital, I guess, in that way. But I don't know. People obviously want to have the book at the table when you're rolling it. So,
well, so I had an interesting email from me. Actually, Mark, I didn't even tell you this is a new story. Mark knows all my stories, but here's a new one. So this
I don't know this one.
Someone wrote me because we do a lot of Foundry. Actually, everything we do is on Foundry. Oh, and someone asked when the Strange Unusual coming to Foundry. As soon as it's ready. Sorry, that's the best answer I got. Soon. They're working on it. They said to me, like, oh, I have some suggestions. I love your module, but I have some suggestions. And one of the suggestions is, like, all your tokens are the pictures from the book of the monsters. But I think most people prefer to have the top-down view of the monsters, if you could do that. Like, it's a no big deal. Like, oh, yeah, you know what? That's a great idea. Let me quickly whip up
let me redraw
150 tokens from a top-down view. And, well, there was a lot to unpack there. I was like, first of all, no. Second of all, what makes you think the majority of people like that? I personally...
Because their players like it.
Right, or they like it. I personally hate the top-down view for lots of reasons. But the point is, it's like, that's very common. It's like people think, oh, I like books, and I go to cons, they have books, and we like books. But that doesn't mean everyone likes books, you know? That's something I think you really have to... I think a lot of people, and hopefully I've been opening up people's eyes with our videos, is like, what we believe, and what I believe, and what you believe is not necessarily what everyone believes.
Yeah. Well, and I don't remember if this was from another one of your streams recently, or if I was talking about this with somebody else, but the idea that, you know, Wizard of the Coast doesn't have to even keep the core fans like that happy if they're just tapping into all these new players out there.
They don't,
you know? And so if they can get everybody to think like, oh yeah, digital's the way, like that's the best way to do it, you know? And if it is easy enough, then it'll be convincing for a lot of people.
I don't think it's going to be,
it's like,
it's going to be really painful for them for a few years, but if they do what they're trying to do successfully, they won't even remember who we are. I mean, it's a sad fact, but I've seen it. But we are the loudest, and we're the most prominent, and we do have a lot of influence. But for a company of that size, with the amount of people they're trying to get, we are a blip to them.
Yeah, a minority for sure.
A super minority, not even a minority. We're a super duper minority. We're very tiny, and you know, and they hope that we'll be replaced by someone else. They just have to get through these next couple of months and years. Keep
I mean, the big thing though is like, I wish there were more public data just about, you know, how many people are playing these games, what kind of games are they playing, and just more of that information out there. Because like when all this OGL stuff was happening, for example, and, you know, YouTube was going crazy about it, you know, before it had gotten even, you know, because it did jump to like NPR and MSNBC and stuff like that. Before it made that jump, I was really just thinking to myself, like, you know, the biggest YouTube channel out there or D&D YouTube channel out there is probably Critical Role with like 1 to 2 million subscribers, and the other like biggest channels, even like the highest viewed D&D niche videos on YouTube are probably like, you know, 1 or 2 million views. So, and that's, you know, like everybody who's just interested in D&D, that's, you know, who's also like on YouTube watching D&D stuff. Everybody who's interested, like 2 million people tops. But we know, at least from some data that I've heard, but this is why I want better data, that there are like 40 million D&D players like that have played, I guess, at some point in the last like 40 years or whatever. So like that would make us, like, what's 2 million out of 40 million? You know, it's a pretty small percentage. And
it's
again,
5%,
that's
but some of those people probably played one time and then never again.
Right.
Exactly.
Those numbers sound about right. And that's, and I don't know if you're doing worldwide or worldwide numbers I don't have, but United States, I have to look them up, but I do have numbers, believe it or not, unofficial
Because
numbers.
that's the thing. I don't even know where these numbers are.
Well, you got to know the right people.
Like you've got to
you gotta
you got to
have the
figure some things
insiders.
out on this, right?
Well,
Like if
sure.
40 million ever played it in the last 40 years, right? And then of the ones who are still alive and are like actually still play the game at all or care about it, and we're not just like, oh, my friend had me play one time, I've never thought about it again in 20 years. That probably gets you down to, I'm being generous, 10 of the 40 million. Probably 30 of the 40 million are just completely out of it completely. So at that point, you are saying that 2 million is being 20% of that or more. If the number is less than 10 million, is better. This is better than 5%.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
true.
This is a good example. Like, so there's a new game that just came out. I'm big into video games. The Honkai Star Rail. Okay, have you ever heard of that? Have you ever heard of
Nope.
Honkai Star Rail? Have you ever heard of that game, Mark?
I've not heard of it.
You know how many people downloaded and played it the first day it came out?
I'm gonna guess 250 million.
I wish 10 million people. Never heard of it. No one's heard of this game. And 10 million
What's it
people.
called? I'm looking this up.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like just look up Star Rail.
Yeah.
It is
First thing that comes up is download now.
Yeah. It's a free to play game. It's they did the Gensei game. I forgot what it's called, but they have 2 or 3 other games out there that are gargantuan. The gacha games, they're monstrous. And this game, first of all, I downloaded it, and the quality is mind-boggling. Like, I was like, I don't know, my God, they must have put millions and millions and millions. I mean, they make a lot of money, so yes, I know they did, but I'm just like, wow, they put so much money into this game. But that's the point. It's like, how are these products and these games doing so well? You've never heard of them. And that's why it's driving Hasbro insane, because they're like, everyone's heard of D&D and we make no money off of it. You know, it's like, how dare they? And then meanwhile, the Honkai is the game series, right? The Genshin Impact, right? So they're very popular. Genshin Impact, you probably heard Genshin Impact's had a lot of press in the last couple of years.
Genshin Impact.
It's their next game.
I don't know what it is, but I've definitely heard of it.
It's the next game in the series by the same developers, and it's good. It's actually, I started playing it last night on my phone. It's very good. I was like, wow, this is a really good game. But the point is, just because there's no one's talking about it, or you don't hear about it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, you know? And that's
another like thing that I meant to touch on, is because there might be 1 to 2 million people who are like on YouTube thinking and talking about this stuff, but think of how many thousands of maybe millions of people who just don't engage with like the internet side of RPGs at all. You know, they just play at home. Maybe they played with their same group forever. Maybe they just go to their game store all the time. Like, they could be still more public about it, but they just don't really engage with it online. That's probably a bigger, like, I imagine that's a bigger portion of the audience than who's like really into the internet side of it. But I don't know.
The silent majority is something that is very difficult. Like, from being in the industry and trying to figure out, like, what the heck do our fans, who are not the ones who are heavily engaged, not the ones who usually come on to Reddit and online forums and other places and talk about things, that are just out there playing the game, what do they actually think? It's so hard to figure that out. And you'll just
I was going to say, because obviously this is something I've heard Steven say a couple times on his stream. I think it might have been you, Mark, but saying how there was a major outcry for an evil-based campaign book or something.
We both said
in Pathfinder, I think.
Yep, there has been.
And then when it came out, like, the sales for the book were not good.
It was like the worst,
because even though there were all these people like asking for it, actually most people were probably just happy, you know, with the typical style.
Some of them were just probably the same person, and you just remember that you saw a lot of people asking for it, but really, if you look over time, it was all just like Bob going on there and asking for the campaign or something like
making
that.
3 accounts and
Or
Yeah,
on the Paizo forums, it's easy to make aliases. I literally saw at one point in time where there was a thread somewhere, and one of my coworkers was like, "Wow, I'm shocked, but it seems like 15 people were talking about Tengu." And I was like, "Okay, but 12 of them were literally the same person using all of their aliases." And they looked at "Oh yeah, that's true. Never mind. It wasn't that unusual when we see that those 12 were all one person."
It's that one
then
guy
it was about the same.
Yeah.
So it's that one guy at Steven's table who has the same character name for
Clapper Bob. Yeah. Well, no, when I worked with Blizzard, this came up during World of Warcraft, and mostly World of Warcraft. Back in when, I don't know if you remember, when WoW came out, it was, only the most popular thing in the entire world, and they had 12 million players like from day one. But the only way you can talk to them was through their forums. That was it. They had the official forums. But the number of people who used the forums, percentage-wise, was like 0.0001%. It was very small comparatively. A couple thousand people at most out of 12 million. But those people were awfully loud. And the developers would hear those things over and over again. And it was something they had to train themselves to learn, like, okay, do we listen to the forums, which is really this percentage of our player base, but are they right? Are they, and that was a discussion that was often, came up. It's like, are they a small sliver? Because to do statistical analysis, you actually need a very small number to have a very accurate analysis. It's actually...
However,
they're outliers, right? So we're trying to figure out.
You need a small number that are taken completely randomly from your entire sample size, not the ones that self-selected by being on the forum.
Right. So that was the question mark that would come up. It's like, is this a small group that represents everyone, or is this a small group that represents their interests?
They definitely aren't. I can tell that. I can't tell you how you can get a good sample size. That's hard unless you pay an expensive polling firm to literally cold contact people.
It's very hard.
And be like, "Hey, person I've cold contacted, are you a tabletop RPG player? Do you play Pathfinder 2nd edition?" Like that. First of all, a lot of the people who are of certain generations don't answer random numbers on their phone anymore anyway. There's all sorts of, like, I don't. So,
certain generation, I don't know. You think I answered my phone? I was walking by my house the other day.
That doesn't do it.
I'm like,
I won't answer like anything.
I remember when I was a kid, we'd run to get the phone. We're so excited. Someone's calling. I'm like, hey, who cares?
Like, I don't know how to get a representative group, but I can tell you that my experience is enough to tell you that those online forums are not a place you'll get a representative answer. And also, especially if someone tries to run like a poll in one of those online forums, I remember a really weird thing that I did on the Paizo forums. At one point, I was just looking to see, does the answer to the question that was put on the poll, is it like the opinion that the person who made the poll wanted it to be or not? And with high probability, it was the one that won the poll was whatever the person wanted it to be, whether or not they said anything biased in their first post where the poll was made up, or even when I couldn't find anything biased in the way that they phrased the question. There was just a very high chance that whatever the person put it up, that was the answer that they got. And I was trying to figure out why. I was like, maybe it's because they told their friends about the poll and their friends had the same opinion as them, and there were so few people who answered it that swung it towards their direction. But for whatever reason, even in some cases where contradictory answers were given to the same question, like, 9 months apart when two people put it up, but the only thing that could predict was not actual data that was matching that question. It was not anything else. It was just, what did the person want the answer to be? And that is a problem with small sample size, and is a problem with self-selecting bias. And it's one that can actually be very demoralizing for creators, because unfortunately, it's also usually selected towards negativity on a lot of places, because that's just how the internet works in general. When someone's upset, or doesn't like the status quo, they'll come on and talk about it as if they're happy.
More likely to express that negative opinion, unfortunately.
Right. So cycle back to conventions where Stephen was talking about at the beginning, where because you hadn't gone to conventions a lot. I didn't go to that many.
That might have been just before we went live too. So yeah, to
maybe it was before we went live. I forgot.
We were talking about how I have yet to go to a TTRPG convention, because when I started playing those games, like I mentioned earlier on stream, we barely even knew what the books were, let alone conventions existed. So it took a couple years to figure that out. And then I didn't mention this earlier, I did have tickets to go to my first one in 2020, and then that got canceled, of course. So
Which one?
And then it took a couple of years for things to come back. So yeah, I am going to be going to one in Philly in June, end of June.
Which one were you going to go to?
Too many games. Oh, which one was I going to go to? Yeah. Was actually Nerdarchy Con, because that was also going to be in Philly. So if you're familiar with the guys Nerdarchy, like an older D&D channel, it's been around like a long time. It was
I've
one of
heard
the first that I was
much
watching.
Like Genshin Impact, but don't know much about it. Just like Genshin Impact. Huh.
I mean, have you heard of the channel WebDM?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I've also heard of that, but don't know much about it.
Yeah. So I just give that as a point of reference, just because they have very similar like channel style, where it's pretty much like two guys like talking about a topic, and that's kind of how they do their videos. So it's almost like a podcast style. Now, Nerdarchy does like more varied stuff, and they were kickstarting a book in 2019, and one of the stretch goals was doing this con, and then unfortunately they had to cancel it. So the rest of the Kickstarter, I'm pretty sure went through all fine, but the convention was the thing that was supposed to happen in like October of 2020, and the world happened.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing with conventions is obviously they are also a biased sample set of people who can afford to go to conventions, etc. Yeah, however, they are a very, very, very different bias sample set than the online people who are often renting online about things. So if you want to be a creator and have your mental health not harmed by going to some of these forums where almost everything is going to be skewed towards negativity, and that doesn't mean everywhere online is. Like, surprisingly, the Pathfinder 2e subreddit is pretty positive, and I like going on there because there's criticisms, but it doesn't overwhelm that one. But conventions, there people are usually happy.
Conventions are great.
I would say I found the same thing actually with DCC, like the Discord groups I'm a part of. With that, people aren't ranting about every other thing. It's support for the game and just talking about maybe how they adjusted at their table or whatever, but it's framed around an appreciation for the game, whereas so much of like D&D discourse is the opposite. Maybe rightfully these days, but
okay, you were like so into this DCC. I'm definitely, after this stream, we're gonna get together. We got to figure out a little party, get you and a couple of the other people. Like, I got all the modules. We can play.
But and then I have to imagine for a convention, it's people who literally want to just come together and not just appreciate, but like celebrate the games.
Oh God,
that's kind of what it's all about. It's like a party for the game. So that's awesome.
Oh yeah, no, if you want to up it this way, when the first time I went to Gen Con, I literally told everyone, they were like, how was it? Because none of my friends went. And I said, dude, it's heaven on earth. I'm like, if I die, when I die, I hope I come back and it's Gen
go
Con.
to Gen Con.
I seriously, I was like, damn, it was so much. Now, this was a long time ago when there was only 30,000 people there. As opposed to now where it's like 150, where it's a little crazy. Still think it's heaven on earth. It's a little different heaven now, but it was a dream. It was like when I went and everyone is playing games and the same games I play. And I have a vivid memory of being they have this convention hall that's like the size of like 5 football fields. That's open 24/7 for gaming. And it was 4 in the morning. 4 in the morning. Like on a Thursday morning. And it is packed with people playing. Like, so many people are playing. And I'm like, 4 in the morning. what is going on here? And everyone is playing, and it's so beautiful. And then I remember I was hungry, and then some guy from Domino's Pizza wheels in a hand truck filled with pizzas, and everyone's going up to him, and he's like, $10 a pie, and I'm like, here's your $10, and here's your pizza, and I'm like, this is so great. This is the and everyone's playing, and everyone's getting along, and no one's like being shamed for the hobby. It was just wonderful.
Well, so what I'm thinking of too, like what, not to date yourself too much here, but like what year was that?
That one was like 2006, 2005, around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking like, yeah, definitely in a world now, so it doesn't really apply to this story too much. But if we were thinking in the 80s, you know, Gen Con,
that's a whole
or even
other
like
level.
early 90s, it's like it's also this world that's kind of before any of this internet discussion community exists.
Right.
So you had to go to these conventions to have any kind of this sort of connection.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, you know, the world's a lot smaller in that way.
Then it was still well, because like, so before that, so the one I would go to in the 90s, which was closer, was E3, and that's the Game Expo. And so in E3, the only way you can get information, so E3 was a convention for video gamers.
Yeah.
That was only
for press.
Only
right?
for press and industry. Only for press and industry. You could buy a ticket, but a ticket was $1,000. Okay. And I was press. So, and I was actually both. So I would go, and that was heaven on earth, by the way, until Gen Con, because that was the only way you can find out about what every video game company was coming out with, is they would have a presentation, and then they had the games on the floor, and you can play them. And like, that was it. That was the only way to find out. And I never slept. Like, I was like, I would be up 3 days straight. It was so much fun. I've never been more tired, like, going to that thing. I would bring friends.
Well,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'd bring friends, and they wouldn't last a single day. And like, let alone 3. They'd be like, dude, man, this is too much. I'm like, it's like Vegas on steroids, E3. It was nuts. Oh my God, it was so crazy.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm, again, like, I don't have this perspective, but it feels like conventions, you know, again, especially in this world where you didn't have the internet community about it, and you didn't get the announcements like on your phone the minute it happens or whatever. It was this just fully immersive experience. It was just flooding you with all the things about the hobby that you love and you want to hear, and everybody there is there for the same purpose. And now today, I think and now again, this is coming from somebody who has never gone yet to a single one, but I feel like some of that magic must be lost because we're kind of immersed in it all the time now, and we're always having this ongoing conversation about it, you know, with thousands of people online. So yeah, we can go to this thing and it's going to be different, and it's real because it's all there happening in real life, and you're seeing all the people and you're in the games. But I feel like there's a little bit that must be lost today because we're just like stewing in it all the time.
I mean, I think you're right. I think you're right, and I think it's nowadays, like, the ones that I've been to for the most part recently are just so frantically full, like Disney World, of just the press of like humanity, just that it does make it feel like it's just overflowing with people. And so like that definitely has an effect on it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even when I would go to Comic-Con, Comic-Con was so much fun. I would go to Comic-Con, and then I would sit in
Bless you.
Excuse me. I would sit in Hall H, which is like the main hall, and he'd just sit there all day, and you would just watch, and they'd have main presentation, and they'd bring people up, and they would talk about the latest movies coming out, and you would see the trailers and see the previews, and this is back in like the 2005, 2008 time, 2010, and nowadays I don't go to those because you can see it on the internet. I don't need to go anywhere, and even those like Sony and Nintendo used to have those big presentations. Now they're all on the internet. They're pre-made. Like the one not that I'm going to say the summit that you went to, because I know you're sick of talking about the summit, but I used to go to a ton of those for the video game world because that's how they would get information to you. They can no other way.
Mhm.
So you'd have to go out there, see the games, play them. And this is, by the way, for video games, which is in its own interesting that they had a summit because they wanted to show you basically a video game. And then they have video games, and then you would play them on their computers, on their setups with their, beefy computers that can handle, pre-optimized code. And then you'd sometimes meet the actors, or you'd go on tours, or you'd go like to medieval times or something. And that was a lot of fun. Sometimes we played like Robotech, and we did like jet fighter simulation one time. It was awesome. And then, and then you go home. And those are great. I don't even know those exist anymore, really, because everything's like online. They just give it to you. You don't have to go anywhere. It's cheaper for them, cheaper for everyone. And they could also get it out to, before they'd invite like 20, 30 people to a summit. Now they can send it out to 2,000 people who can all cover it as opposed to 20, So
Right.
It's just, you're right. The world is different.
The times have changed. And it's funny though, because like you're saying now, it's like WotC is kind of like trying to play catch up with some of that, like following the lead of how these gaming companies used to do it. And I don't know if it's like they're behind the curve or it just doesn't work because it's a different industry, or
they're behind the curve and they're using a model that software companies still do it this way. And that more has to do with secrecy, and it has just to do with the model is different. And they're using their experience. This is just me guessing, but I think they're using their experience from software development and also some game development, because that's how they still do it to a point. But what they also would do is this was very popular, they would do tours. So Bethesda would come to Manhattan, and I lived in Manhattan, so it was very easy for me to go to these things every week. Like literally every week, every 2 weeks, someone would be coming to Manhattan, whether it was Bethesda or Microsoft or Sony or whoever was coming out with the game. Blizzard was there once, and they would say, "Here you go. We're going to be here on this day. You're invited. Come down. You'll get to meet the developers and play the game." And they would go to New York, Chicago, Boston. They go to major hubs. And then if you would
do a tour,
right? They do a tour. You go to Philly, and then you would drive there and go. That's something else they used to do. Video game games. And they kind of do it. They still do it, but not to the extent, because now everything's digital. But that's also why you have the conventions, because people like Paizo are at these conventions. Like people like me go to these conventions, and that's where you can, press the flesh and meet people and really get them excited, because them meeting you and playing the game with you or talking to you about their game will be very memorable to them and help sell the game.
It's impactful.
It's very impactful. You know what? WotC hasn't been to a game convention. They invented the game convention. That's why people are so angry about it. Because, dude, you basically invented the whole concept. Like all this stuff, all this fantasy, the concept of leveling up, the concept of magic, the concept of gaming conventions, like everything, our entire culture, you invented. Yet you take no part in it. You have decided to no longer go to conventions. You have decided to no longer interact with the fans. You have decided to not be part of our community, and you are standoffish. You are in the castle, off in the distance, watching us do our things. And then you decided to make a presence and say, yes, this is all because of us. And I'm like, dude, you've been all the way over there watching us. You don't get to come in here and claim this is yours. Okay, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago you could. That day is gone, man. You got to earn your place here. Your first level. It's like you gotta level up, baby. And they're like, what? No, we're not. We're the gods. We invented this game. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. Maybe you just too late, too little, too late. You can't just decide you want to join the party now that things aren't going your way anymore, And that's I think the mentality that's happening, is that we just see through that. Like they're like, we're gonna be going to conventions again. I'm just like, oh, that's nice. And they're like, but just us saying we're going should be enough for you. I'm like, no, it's not. I hate to break it to you, everyone goes to conventions now. You're going to be 1 out of 50. Sorry, you're going to be 1 out of 500
Even I go to
people.
conventions now.
Even you go to conventions. But the point is but that's the point. It's like, dude, you're not special. Like when you used to have the Sagamore Ballroom and you had a medieval castle on the floor, that was pretty cool. You were cool back then. Now what? You're going to just show up and you expect us all to kowtow and bow down to you and say, oh, thank you, Lord and Master, for coming to the game convention. May we kiss your feet? Nope. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're not going to happen anymore. And I think they're stunned. I think they're stunned at how dare they? Don't they know who we are? Why aren't they like worshiping us as the gods and masters of role playing? It's like,
yeah, I don't. It's like you're right about pretty much all that there. I feel like the one thing is I've got to wonder, like, how surprised are they about all this? Because it's like when they're so disconnected, right, to have squandered all of this, which they did, like that's all legit. Can they also then be surprised that we're not like in love with everything they do?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because they must realize how distant they are. And at this point,
I guarantee they are.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but like that whole
yeah.
And John, feel free to jump in, Mark. Like the whole OGL thing, they never had a plan in which they were going to fail. I guarantee it never came into existence. They only had a plan, I guarantee, of what happens next after this succeeds and then this, and they had a whole plan laid out, and it failed, and they had no idea what to do. So yes,
you're right about that. You're right about that. Yeah,
plan.
Yeah, they had no contingency plan.
Yeah, because I heard that more or less firsthand from Kyle.
Really?
Yeah.
Now you didn't want to talk about the summit. Oh, right, you did interview.
It was
Kyle.
in his video.
Yeah, that was in the interview.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know
just
what?
Basically, he went over the whole, like, the plan that they had and how like the designers who might have had more of a sense that, hey, this is a terrible idea, like weren't in the planning phases of that at all.
Right.
So it was all too little, too late, and then there was nothing to do.
I mean, what's your whole take on that? I mean, you see, I'm a grizzled old veteran who is like incredibly.
Sure.
I wouldn't say negative. People like you negative. No, I'm realistic. Okay, that's the thing. I'm very realistic, and being realistic can be a little depressing sometimes.
Sure.
So that's my thing.
Yeah.
Mark has a probably nuanced. He's more level-headed than me, and he's in the middle. But what about you? Because you were all new to this, and this was probably. I don't want to put you down, but I mean, did you know about the OGL history, and was this all new to you? Were you learning this on the fly?
No, I mean, so I had been using the OGL to publish adventures for probably like 2 years before this happened. So that's why I was somebody who felt personally affected by it. Good. Not to the degree. The thing is, like, I'm as much as like I am a publisher, most of my and I do this full time.
Right.
My full time is mostly YouTube. And like sponsorships. So the publishing is still a big part of what I do. It would have absolutely affected like me on a personal level, and it would have had to like change things about my job in big ways. I wouldn't have gone completely under, though. Like it wasn't the whole rug swept out from under me, but I still felt that. And when I recently was actually on a stream with Luke from the DM's Lair, he said this, but then I completely agreed, is that it literally felt like actually his words were, it felt like being cheated on or something. And I said it to me, the thing that I rationalized it with was it just felt like a bad breakup, because it was just this thing that I had this emotional investment in for so long. And then they just completely come out of nowhere and like tear it all up. So it was rough. And that's why for me, it's like, I was already at a point where I was heavily considering, playing and really looking into other games, because I've been building up this interest for a long time. But because so much of my, when you're like a full-time creator, so much of your free time is also just thinking about the thing that you're going to be, working on in your actual working hours, if there's any distinction between those. So for me, like so much of my free time, even though I might want to be reading and playing about other games, I felt kind of forced to focus so much on D&D. So with the OGL stuff, as much as it sucked, and I wish it never happened, because it did like create all this unhappiness in our hobby. For me, like I try to look on the bright side of like, well, now I finally have a little more freedom with being able to and an incentive to like look into other games and explore, more about the hobby and not focus so like myopically on this one company and the things that they produce only. So I've tried to look at it in that positive way. That now I get to actually play and read DCC and play and read Pathfinder sooner or later, and and hopefully, I don't know, just explore more of the hobby.
We have a new super chatter who, for $5, James said, "What do you think is a good balance between too much published content and not enough? D&D rarely publish new books. Paizo almost produces too much often, I feel." So I'll answer first because I already have my opinion on this. So D&D was a dying brand, and they outsourced all their books, and they were only publishing 2 or 3 a year in most, and they were all being outsourced, and they had a very, very, very small team, and they were all adventure books, and they were all like just one-offs, and suddenly D&D got really popular, and suddenly it became a big name with Stranger Things and everything else that was going on in the world. And well, what do you know? Maybe we need to actually make the team much bigger. And then in the last couple of years, they've been ramping up their books and ramping up their development team, and they have been putting out a lot more books, but a lot of them have been really bad quality or poor quality. Not all of them, but a lot of them really have been reviewed very poorly. So it doesn't seem to matter if you put out a little books or a lot of books. It's the quality of the books, in my opinion. Pathfinder used to put out way more books than they put out now. You think they put out a lot of books now?
They were tiny.
They were tiny.
So by page count, it hasn't changed as much as you think, because they put out those
You're right.
32-page player companions,
the splat books, those
every
are
month.
Constant.
And now instead you get like, the 4 Lost Omens books that are much longer. It's still not like that many fewer pages,
but it's easier to digest 4 individual books than 12 small little ones.
And they're more of an event.
Yes.
Like when that book comes out, it's more exciting. With the little one, it just kind of gets lost in the mix.
It totally got lost in the mix. So that's, I think it's, and again, but also the quality, like every one of these Paizo books, it's like each is better than the next, like there's even quote the worst reviewed Paizo Pathfinder 2nd edition book is probably better than, your average or best 5e book. They're just, the quality is phenomenal on these books. But they also have really, that's something else, is like they've been publishing these books for 10, 12 years now. They know what their audience likes. They've gotten very good at that. They have various types of books they publish too. They publish adventures, they publish lore books, they publish new rule books. So each one of them they know how to publish. D&D has really only been publishing 1 or 2 types of books, and they're always still a little different, and they try to squeeze it. All their books feel the same. They feel like they're trying to squeeze a 500-page book into a 200-page book, and that's why a lot of them have been coming out with bad reviews, because it feels like that. And as you read it, it feels like, where is everything? It's all like very skimpy, and feels like you have to fill in a huge amount of holes. And Pathfinder doesn't do that. Pathfinder will put out 1 book on one part of the world, and that's it, and go very deep into it. And that's, I think, hell, we do that too. Heck, we got 1 book. You want to play a dragon? I got a whole book on how to play a dragon. 1 book. That's it. That's all this book does. You want to play a dragon, but you need 130.
It doesn't try to like pad out the page count with like, here's 20 pages of dragon-based spells and magic items, or any of that stuff that sometimes books do to try to.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is about playing a dragon. That is what is in the book. It is a dragon that you can play, and some rules for like if you collect hordes because you're a dragon, because you might do that.
But there's 45 different types of dragons. This 1 book can keep you going forever. Like there's enough in this book to keep you going for a long, long, long time. And that's something else, is that I feel like sometimes the 5e books are one shots, and you bought this, and you're like, now what? So, oh, look at that. Waterless for $2 said Dragon Ancestry is still the GOAT. Mark wrote the whole book except for one ancestry that was designed by Ginny D.
I still wrote that.
And he still wrote that, so he wrote the whole book.
I wrote the whole book.
She designed it.
Ginny D came up with the concept behind it.
It was a good.
But
you got admit, it was
a great concept, but
concept.
I can't claim to have come up with the concept behind red dragons or blue dragons either,
true.
right?
That's true.
Somebody else
All
came
right,
up with
Mark
those.
wrote the whole book.
D came up with the toadstool dragons. I didn't come up with almost any of the concepts for the dragons because Steven, you came up with some.
The wild dragons.
You and I together came up with the wild dragons.
Yes.
I guess I did come up with a few of the wild dragons, but other than that, I was writing the book. But the dragons all existed in Pathfinder or D&D lore, except the toadstool with Ginny D and the wild ones that you and I came up with.
Yeah. I came up with the indigo, and then we realized we needed to come up with a full family, so we needed 5, and then I like randomness, so wild dragons, they're wild, they're crazy, anything can happen, and they're crazy dragons, they're wild and crazy, they're fun.
Yeah, to get us back on topic there.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
But what about,
see, we brought it back to randomness eventually.
Yeah, but Mark, yeah, I was gonna call you Mark. Bob, what about you? Do you feel, or do you just do you collect these books or not really, or you just sort of buy what you want and you don't care about the numbers?
Not so much. Yeah, I basically before starting the channel, I would rarely get new D&D books outside of them just being as gifts, basically, because it was like stuff that I felt like I didn't necessarily need at the table, but it would be cool to have. And then when I had the channel, it was like, oh, okay, I know if I make a video about this new book, it'll get a lot of views. So I got into more buying the books regularly. But after, honestly, like Icewind Dale, which I think was 2021, I really that was good, first of all, but that was kind of like the peak for me. I felt like that book kind of had everything. Like, it was a setting, it was an adventure. It had the most monsters they ever put into one campaign book. And I played the campaign. Awesome. And there were still plenty of stuff, that I changed in it. And, I have a whole video series about how I kind of tweaked it and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, after that point, I stopped buying so many of them. And ultimately, I personally, I kind of have a sort of minimalist approach to collecting things in general. I'm not a fan. I want to keep it pretty slim because I wanted if I get a book, I want to know it front and back, so I try not to get too much. Now, recently I've been going back on that again as I'm starting to get into a bunch of other systems and everything. It's getting the core book of a bunch of different things. So I don't know. Ultimately, I like a collect, or what am I trying to say? I guess a catalog that is kind of smaller though. And again, I'll circle back to DCC.
I was about to say DCC. Really they do that. Yeah. How
it's one core book, and that's how it's been for 10, 12 years that the system's been out, maybe 11 years. They've had the same core book, and actually they're about to do their 10th printing or something of it.
Yep, I saw that.
They've changed little bits along the way. Yep. But by and large, the rules are the same. I think there's one supplementary rule book, and then they do have setting books, and they just came out with their first bestiary last year. But all in all, you could get the whole collection, and it wouldn't take up a ton of space. Or you can just have the core book, and that's the game. So I like that. Basically, I like the simplicity of that sort of model.
So
personally,
by the way, I love Icewind Dale. I've read all the Dritz books. I played the Icewind Dale video game. I played Icewind Dale with all the expansions. I played Icewind Dale 2. I love Icewind Dale. I love the setting. This is a good book. And it's 320 pages. It's actually a real book, unlike their most recent ones that are 200 pages. That's a big difference. This is 50% more book. There's a big difference between 200 and 300 pages. And yeah, as you said, this is a nice, meaty book that really had a lot in it, and it's a good book.
Yeah, honestly, I ran the campaign, and I could use that book. I could run like a whole second campaign out of that book, not repeat any material pretty much, because there's just so much in there that you could really run it for years if you wanted to. So there was a lot of value in that book for sure. And it's interesting because in that book, I know they actually got a bunch of like the top writers from DM's Guild to contribute like sections to it and stuff. So it's cool how they put that one together. Yeah, but honestly, pretty much after that book, like I know you said you really liked Wild Beyond the Witchlight for whatever reason. Like I never even gave that one a read, but I know that's another one people do really like that did come out after Icewind Dale.
It's
actually, for whatever reason, that was kind of the end of it for me.
It's a fascinating book because you can play the entire adventure without combat.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've heard about it.
It's really interesting. It's very interesting from a design point of view. And it also is very original. Yeah. So I'll tell you though.
That's what you want.
Well, this book, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which do you think sold better? Wild Beyond the Witchlight or Strahd? Which do you think?
I would assume Strahd, right?
God, no. Yeah. Wild Beyond the Witchlight destroyed Strahd. Not even close.
But Strahd is the only one that people are ever running when you look to see what people are running.
Yeah. It's like the most popular one, I think. Maybe not best sales, but okay. That's interesting.
This thing destroyed
how
they reprint. They made.
The fact that you asked made me think that the answer was going to somehow be Witchlight because you wouldn't have asked otherwise. But I didn't want to try to play that game.
One of the best-selling books of all time.
Wow,
it sold.
So you got the numbers. I don't know the numbers.
It sold. It took it. Well, this is what the exact numbers are. What Strahd managed to sell in something like 2 or 3 years, or like almost up to the point of now. This sold like in the first month.
Well, I guess it had, Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Then this is going to sound backwards, but Wild Beyond the Witchlight has time on its side here. Even though Strahd was out for so much longer, there were so many fewer people buying those books.
Correct.
When Strahd came out at the very beginning of 5th edition.
And never underestimate a circus campaign. And something like, and this was also at peak. This, I believe, was peak D&D. I believe this was it. This is when
I got to see when that came out now. Yeah,
it was about a year and a half ago. That's when everyone was talking about how great D&D was.
Was it only a year and a half ago?
Yeah, it's not that
long. It was a little more.
Maybe 2 years.
Yeah, it feels maybe 2 years. Oh, September 2021. Wait, that can't be right. I feel like that is exactly
September
when Icewind Dale came out.
It's a year and a half ago.
Yeah, that really?
Okay.
You got
maybe Icewind Dale was 2020.
I know. Is that crazy?
But
I may have been thinking about announcements of Wild Beyond the Witchlight as being sooner than that. And
no, it was the year before it was Icewind Dale. But I believe this was actually peak D&D, where everything was coming up roses.
Yeah, and I was about to second that because I think I literally around that time is when I made. It was a pretty short video about like has D&D peaked, because I forget what made me look this up, but I was using Google Trends search. If you've ever done that, where you can look at the SEO, different search terms, whatever. I mean, I'm sure you have with the SEO stuff. And the term D&D, just like lowercase d, lowercase n, lowercase d, actually had a peak around that time and then had been dipping for a while after. And I think it really was this fall 2021.
Yep.
And I kind of lined it up with like seasons of Stranger Things and that, like when those were coming out, because they would get major boosts around then.
Yeah.
And then there was this big lull through the pandemic. And so, it really was probably late 2021 that was like the Nirvana state of D&D.
Well, everyone was home.
That it started trailing.
Oh, yeah. Everyone was home. Everyone was watching Stranger Things. Everyone was watching Critical Role. Everyone was bored. Everyone was buying D&D. And it was just like, this is it. Like, it looked like it was also, it wasn't scary. It wasn't like vampires, which you think, oh, vampires. You'd be surprised. Not everyone loves vampires. Not everyone likes Icewind Dale. Like, they're like, ooh, fun circus, coovy, scary circus. That's a little bit more appeal to everyone. And it got really good reviews. So, and it was just, it just was right place, right time, sold unbelievably well. Now, there's about a 2-year development cycle for these things. So that's when they started to think, wow, look at how great everything is. You're doing amazing. Let's ranch it up a notch. That's when they started to hire more people. Amanda was hired a little bit around that time, a little bit before that time. They started to steal all the Paizo developers. And they were really ramping it up. And then things started to go the other way. But a lot of it's their own fault. You're going to put out Spelljammer, put out 364-page books. What the hell do you think's going to happen, man?
Well, and honestly, I think Spelljammer, and I feel like the same thing's going to happen with Planescape, just like it kind of did with Dragonlance. It's like these are things that a portion of the online community really wants, and that's, I feel like, who they were listening to, because it's like it makes sense for them to try to tap into these things that were really popular. Like maybe they can be very popular again, but with something like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, it's new, it's Feywild, like everybody loves that. Versus, if you just suddenly drop all of this like established lore about, Spelljammers, and it's so different, and like especially that is so different from the general high fantasy vibe of D&D, like prior to, it made sense that Spelljammer and it was then produced and published, printed in this different way. There were too many things different about it, and then it didn't connect with the wider audience of all these new folks. I think
I guarantee that was a test run to see if they can release smaller volumes for like, this is the fighter set, this is the wizard set. Like they were going to release 64-page books for each class.
Well, they are still doing something similar with Planescape. I think the page counts are higher, but it's coming out in a 3-box set.
Yeah, I guarantee that's an experience. Like, you don't go that different if there's nothing behind it. Like, they don't just do that for fun. Like, they're trying to test something. And that's my guess. Because, hey, what do you know? Pathfinder announced Remastered, where they're coming out with 4 smaller books. Who would have thought?
Well, that's still kind of nice.
I mean,
like,
they're not necessarily smaller when you
the
add
400
up
pages are not smaller, but
isn't it?
They're smaller than the core rulebook, which was like 600 and some,
so
and they've divided it out more.
They're 400.
Exactly. Yeah. See, like that's the thing. You already held up the DCC core a couple times. That thing's like 500 pages. I've thought to myself, like, this is cool. I like having it all in one place. But for usability,
do you want to play this with us, Bob? I promise you, it won't take that long for you to learn these rules. Look,
exactly, it's intimidating.
Just read all 650 pages, and we'll start the game next week. Okay,
but it's like instead of 650 pages and then a 200-page Game Master book, it can be split out more evenly between those. Exactly. And so it's not like they added more books like with the Spelljammer thing, because they took the content from the core rulebook, the Game Master Guide, the Bestiary, and the Advanced Player's Guide, aka 4 books, and they made them into 4 books as well. It's not all so heavy in the core rulebook.
You wrote too much, Mark. It's too big.
Yeah,
I heard the original was over 800.
Down the size by copy fitting it.
And not only that, let me tell you, Bob. Okay, when you get this book, not only do you get this beautiful 650-page book, but the font is super duper small, so you got lots and lots of reading really ahead of you.
If you compare to like a lot of those OSR ones that are more like old school with the giant font size,
I hate the giant font size.
Well, I mean, if you actually look at like I have the 1E DMG over here. Oh, that is tiny.
Oh, it is. Yeah, that's
I don't like reading it.
Oh, that font size is way. The funny thing is the font on the D&D books, the WotC books, terrible font. It's so small in some places, and they use sand.
They said they're making it bigger for the new core ones that they're printing, which is a good move. Yeah.
Well,
not only that, they use sans serif. Small typeface. That is a big no-no. And I'm like, dude, who is doing your typography? You never make a small sans serif font. It's impossible to read. It looks like lines. It's whatever. I have a lot of problems with their layouts. That's my big thing with them is layouts. Their layouts drive me crazy. Which is only because it's so close to genius. It's like this is amazing. This is amazing. This is terrible. Amazing. Atrocious. I'm like, dude, you guys. You messed it so bad it destroyed the rest of the book. That's just me. I'm big about layouts.
Just Steven.
Well, I like layout. Well,
There are some people who do, although there's certain tiny layout things that like industry people care about, but none of the fans actually
Yeah,
do.
and that's true too. It's just overlooked by a lot of people, but
as someone who taught design for a long time, and Steve Jobs got it, you might not consciously be aware of why something works, but you are subconsciously. And
so I like that point, because even though a lot of people might not, think they care either way, it could actually make the product a lot more usable.
It does.
So and they just don't know what they're missing. So
correct. And that's my big thing. I've said this for years, and I don't know if there's a good topic if you ever want us on your show, Mark, is Bob. I called you Mark. Bob is so I have said that the stat blocks for D&D is why monsters are bad in D&D. It's literally because of the design of the monsters, and it limits how much text and content and the page layouts. And I have fought heavily against that. All of our layouts, including our 5e, we use the Pathfinder layout where we flow monsters like this. And then everyone who reviewed our books, the 5e books, our 5e book got a better review than the Pathfinder book. Because they're like, these monsters are fantastic. And I'm like, why are they so good? I'm like, because we were able to fit like an extra 100, 200 words in there because we didn't use your crappy layout. I'm like, that's why. And they're like, huh. But no one thinks of these things. And I'm like, I know. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's funny because I feel like I guess they might be starting to catch on, because I know there was the Monsters of the Multiverse book where they're changing things around. But it's funny because it's like 5e monsters are almost in a unique like sweet spot of not working out right, because I personally
what the hell does that mean?
I'm saying, because I go the other way when I'm printing, or not printing, but making new monsters for like my 5e publications. I just keep it very like minimal design for like what you so that like the text fits on like kind of a small like card.
We do, but
it's everything you need to run this monster.
We do.
And of course you maybe have a little more like DM massaging to like bring it to life. Whereas I'm sure like your design has like everything you could want, which is great. I like it just a little more like skeletal, I guess. But I think D&D has this like, as what I'm saying, is like this unique spot where they kind of like give you a good amount, but it's like not quite everything, but it's also like too much for it to be like easily like pasteable into your notes. You know what I mean? So I go the other way where I strip it down a little further.
I think you're right, because I've brought this point up to Mage Hand and other publishers, and they're all like,
oh, sure.
Huh. And now I start to see them that they're doing the same layout. I'm like, just don't use the box, man. Don't use the box. I'm like, why do you use the box? I'm like, because everyone used to use the box. And I'm like,
it's called a stat block, Steven.
No, don't use the box. I actually tried at first, and I couldn't get like, because we get about 600 words per page, 650 if we're careful. And with a block, you can only get like 400 or 500, and I was like, dude, I can't write a good monster with 500 words or 400 words.
Yeah, well, and you know what?
Sucks.
I think this goes back to the like digital versus print thing we were talking about, because if you're creating this, it's like there's more text to it, so there's like more you want to like read and reference, but it's like it's nice to hold that in your hands and read it. But if you're designing it for a computer program to run, or to be easily like searchable and like scannable like in game or something on a screen, having that nice block format might work better for D&D, like with the digital side of things.
Well, they were coming off the 4th edition, and 4th edition used the block text for their monsters, and it actually worked out pretty well. But that was those monsters were built very differently, and they had a lot of information in a very small amount of space, so it worked perfectly for 4e, but it does not work for 5e, and whatever. But you could see, that's why I'm always about design, because like design could affect like something like, oh, let's put the monsters in a stat block, an actual block that has now affected millions of people. Like this one thing has affected millions of people, and how the entire industry creates monsters. And it's like that was a
Sure.
big deal. Like who? No, they probably didn't think about it. Like they're like, just put it in a block. Looks cooler. Whatever. They're like,
Yeah, it's
dude,
making me wonder when the term stat block like originated now. Like I don't know who coined that. Like what edition did that? Because like the oldest monsters were more text, like the features, like the combat features of a monster, even though there was a stat block, like a list of stats, there would still be like combat and other things you want to reference in
I
the
don't know.
paragraphs beneath.
a lot of them
I wonder.
Yeah, I've read a lot of these books, a lot of the like the Dungeons and Dragons, or sorry, Designers and Dragons books, and I've read all the history books in D&D. I don't know if anyone knows where stat block come from. Like gear score, which I'm actually kind of surprised D&D and Pathfinder never got into. That was a add-on for WoW, and now like every video game has a gear score, which is like a combination of all your gear plus your level to give you a number that says like, okay, you have to be a gear score of 260 to go into this dungeon, and if you don't have that gear score, you'll die. And that way, it's an average of like a combination of your gear and your level, and that's very prevalent in video games. For us, it's just basically level, but seriously, I actually kind of use gear score indirectly in my games with my guys because they didn't have that much magic items. Like they were like level 13 and they were still using +1 weapons. And by then you're supposed to have like +2 weapons and stuff. I'm like, guys, like, why do we suck so bad? I'm like, guys, you never got to upgrade you got to upgrade your gear, man. Your gear sucks. And then they all updated their gear. They're like, oh my God, we're doing so great. I'm like, what a surprise, guys. What a surprise. So I'm seriously, Mark, none of them they didn't update their gear. Like they were still using
just
their gear.
Use automatic bonus progression with them.
Well, they just, because I know, I actually should. I should. Oh, yeah, they're saying Final Fantasy, it's called level or item level. But gear score is something. But yeah, a lot of these things do come from Dungeons and Dragons or some specific person or some specific video game.
Well, and so I'm wondering, like, I have no idea, but I'm wondering if a stat block could even have been like a holdover from wargaming stuff. Like I have no idea.
Oh yeah, it could be.
It could be even earlier. It sounds a little more modern to me, but I don't know.
Oh wait,
because that's something I learned more recently was that like THAC0 was actually like something to do with wargaming, and that's like kind of where it came from. Was like how they calculated armor of like ironclad ships in these war games or something.
Wait,
it was a simplification to allow you to deal with the fact that they used a very non-intuitive mathematical expression back in wargaming. So it was like THAC0 itself was to help you.
So it was innovative at the time.
Or like, yeah, it was to help you do things more easily. Because they were already requiring you to like subtract from a thing. They were, instead of adding together, right? It'd be like you hit 0 on this, but if their armor class is 5, then you hit 5 higher, and if it's negative, then it's a better armor class. So you hit you need to roll a higher roll to hit it. And so basically THAC0 was like a sort of a shortcut to get through this very like very unintuitive math that you were doing.
Wait, they said someone, Ollie said that Justin Alexander tweeted today the history of the stat block. So
today?
Yes, today.
Wow.
History of the stat block. Oh my God, yes, I have the article. He wrote an article about the history of the stat block. Oh my God, look how there we go.
You did it, Steven. You asked for it and the universe provided.
I was from April 24th.
So I guess it's not literally today.
No,
but he did very recent.
No, but his article he wrote on the 25th, but he did tweet about this today 5 hours ago.
Oh, okay.
And he says, I think a stat block can tell a lot about a role-playing game. What types of information do you need to juggle? What does the game consider important in the disgusting? I think it wrote disgusting.
Distinguishing.
Yeah, I know, but it looks like disgusting. Distinguishing one game character from another. How complicated?
We should do like a whole stream of Steven narrating with his
Hey man, I mispronounce a lot. So we can... Okay. And look, my allergies are up. I can't see very well. I'm like, my eyes are tearing. This is the 1 month a year that I hate because I have to wear my glasses and now my contacts, and it's hard for me to see. And this is a small font. I'm old, man. I used to be like, I had bionic eyes. Now I could barely see anything.
It looks like the Lost Caverns of Sojkant, according to this, had the first thing that you would really call a stat block, because just 3 goblins with hit points on it was not a stat block. Because they at least gave some information and like a list of spells for the Copper Dragon. So there you go.
Yeah, they have a whole thing. They have Dave Arneson's Temple of the Frog, and that wasn't really, they're still figuring out how modules work. And then they have the Palace for the Vampire Queen, which was an actual table. That might be the first table. And it's not really a stat block. It was more like a table. And then they go through and they explain how it works. But the funny thing is these stat blocks, which are literally just strings of numbers and letters,
right?
That is what DCC uses still to this day.
Yep.
And it is like, it's like reading computer code, man. You're just like, what the hell is that? Like, they don't even bother with making it pretty.
It takes a little getting used to.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it's literally reading code, because it's like, take the whole block and put it into one sentence. You're like, what? It's like just one run-on sentence, and like that's the whole stat block, baby. But it conserves a lot of space when you do it that way. I tell you. A lot easier. But yeah, no, here we go. The whole history. Wow. Anything? You have any other questions you want to know answers to?
Yeah, maybe there's a random thing about it. People in chat are saying we should get the author of the article to come on.
Justin Alexander. Yeah, he gets his blog, the Alexandria. That's like one of the most popular role playing blogs in history.
Yeah, I've seen this before. I don't know what.
Yeah,
what were some of the articles
that's been there for years.
Yeah, it's a very old blog that's been around.
There's a few of them that people just pass around like all the time, like the one about like running mysteries, the 3 clue rule one, which was what would have been written.
I didn't even know that came from here.
Yeah, it's a 2008 Alexandrian article.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 15 years ago, and I know that's been passing around. That's probably like the Alexandrian article that if someone has only heard of one and doesn't know it's from the Alexandrian, then that would be it. So, for example, if I go to the other room right now, interrupt the meeting that she's in, and ask Linda about the 3 clue rule for mysteries, I guarantee you she knows what it is. But I also nearly guarantee you she did not know it was from an Alexandrian article in 2008. So that's how you pick.
I should do a video about that.
There you go. You need some new ideas. So wait, what is the next new weird thing you're going to do based on real life? You did the 5-foot step. You did potions.
And the eating, the food,
you did
and the
potions.
eating.
Yeah, rations, potions. We did encumbrance. Those ones didn't get as much attention, but they were equally as goofy and fun.
Do one for Pathfinder's 3-action economy, trying to see if you can do like 3 of the actions that are on there in 6 seconds.
That'd be good. I'm sure
people are like, well, I should be able to draw my weapon and take my hand and switch my stance and do all these other things for free.
Yeah, well, something that I got a lot of requests for, especially after the food one, was I guess in Pathfinder, and now maybe this is just a 1E thing. I don't know where in Pathfinder this originated, but I guess there are actual just descriptions written out for what a typical ration might look like for each of the core races or something.
I think 1E may have had that.
Yeah, it's just a little more descriptive because I based my ration video off of pretty much like the one line that says it's I'm gonna get it still: dried fruit, jerky, hardtack, and nuts. And that was the video. But apparently Pathfinder has like, well, this is like what a dwarf ration might consist of. This is like what an elf ration might consist of. Well, so I might do a follow up like that.
Yeah, PF1
one that I do have. Yeah, I'll say one that I do have. I think Steven's trying to find it right now. I don't know.
Probably.
But another idea that I have in the back of my head that I might do as a collaboration with another creator. I don't want to spoil who that is though, in case it doesn't end up being a collaboration. Is basically just testing out like archery, for lack of a better word, with like the timing of like loading, quote unquote, like really like knocking an arrow, aiming, shooting
those arrow shots,
and like make them with some degree of accuracy, because it just so happens that myself and this other creator have like some practice with archery.
Nice.
So That could be a fun one.
Well,
That'd be
here's
cool.
one.
Got-
Someone
you
One
really
thing
gotta look at
Pathfinder
Finder.
2 has
Yeah.
for meals is like actual recipes in
I
some
mean,
of the books.
you're
no
stealing.
way.
You're stealing my bit. I was
Okay,
going to
go
say
ahead,
right
Steven,
here in the travel guide, there's pages of actual recipes that Mark just ruined for me of things you can make,
Hey,
including
look,
drinks.
I almost
Hey.
said that even before you went for
Yeah,
the book.
yeah.
We just
And I can't
the
believe
full
nobody's done a
conversation
video
moved.
about that yet, though. Like just making any of those recipes. Somebody
yes,
must have.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Nonad
Yeah.
did one of the drinks.
Oh,
he,
good.
He did
Good,
one
good.
of the
Okay.
drinks.
Yeah.
Nice.
I saw him do.
And
Because
I
I know
know people who haven't necessarily done videos, but have at least like posted about it online. Because like there's some ribs that were on one of them that people made that was in one of the earlier books than the one Steven has there. But yeah, there's a bunch of recipes.
Yeah, that would
for
be
like
interesting.
regional foods, because to like help people understand like what do people eat in this region. Because that one's from the book Travel Guide that Steven has there, which is more of a like, what is it like to actually live in this fantasy world? Like, and go to places, and you need to know what people eat to understand more about their culture.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, do without it. We got a super chat from one of our regulars, Ollie Wright. He just wanted to say how Bob World Builder covered the OGL situation was great. Thank you. There we go.
What a weird
Appreciate
like
it.
up and down like tonality.
Very musical reading there.
That's how when I do my what's the prepared texts. That's how I read prepared text. Keeps people awake. Because if you're just like, you open the door, there is a big statue in front of you. You got to be like
the opposite of monotone. You got to be all over the place.
Open the door. There's a big statue in front of you, and then like, ooh, it keeps them. You got to keep them entertained, baby. Yeah, give you that one for free. You use like weird. Yeah, you use like weird leveling with your voice, and people are like, "What the hell's going on?"
There you go.
So they said I sound mad.
Has clarified that what he particularly liked was that since you were always looking for the good in situations, it was quite a thing for you to come in and criticize it. So it had more weight.
Oh yeah.
Than if someone like Steven, who's more of a realist and will look at like both sides of the thing and come up with something to criticize and something to praise, he's always going to do that.
Yeah, but I'm rarely wrong.
Oh yeah. I mean, there was if anybody, that's the thing, nobody made a video saying, hey guys, this OGL situation actually isn't that bad. Nobody made that video because there was no way to even find it in the situation.
Right.
Like it was it was impossissible.
Well, the more you dug into
as
it,
someone who
the more we dug into it, the more we thought about it. It was insane. And
you're right. It just kept getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
So even me as someone who like, tries to, find the silver lining to a lot of stuff, most of my like I don't like to right, like it's somewhat popular and for good reason because it gets clicks, whatever. No matter the situation, it could be like, milestone leveling sucks, or like XP leveling sucks, like whatever. Like just framing that video is a style people do because it works. So I'm not like knocking on that, but I like to try to, have like the positive twist on things instead, or at least a neutral twist, like just questioning or something. So even for me, I think is what Ollie's saying here is how generally looking on the bright side still had to come out and be like, okay, this is really bad. Here's why. But let's play this other game instead, was just kind of the approach I took.
Yeah, no, I always think if I'm watching Bob, I'm always thinking of the Monty Python, always look on the bright side of life. You're always so positive and always so happy and looking for things.
Appreciate it.
Then you come to my place and you're like, I'm going to tell you why this sucks and why they're going to screw you. And I'm going to use logic and reason and explain to you how other companies do it. And people are just like, I'm like,
well, it's still super insightful. Like I like both. Like that's why I still watch your stuff.
Thanks. And again, I'm just realistic. That's the thing. It's like companies are just, they're not your friends, man. They just aren't. Not big ones. Like small ones can be your friends. Local stores can be your friends. Small companies, your gaming stores, those people can be your friends.
My company is my friend, like the LLC that only has me in it.
Mark and I get along great. We're friendly. But small companies can be friendly. But as companies get bigger and bigger, it's extremely hard. And
yeah, exactly. And I think that's the important thing to say is like that it's just, it becomes too great of a challenge for them to be like personable, because whether they're trying or not, whereas we were saying before, WotC in some ways had intentionally like distanced themselves over the years by not doing a lot of things. For some companies, it's just too hard to do those things like at certain points. So I don't know.
Well, that's why Disney's probably been the only company that manages to somehow. They're fascinating. I bring them up a lot because they managed to be one of the biggest companies, most powerful, strongest companies, not just on Earth, but in history of ever. Like they're unbelievably powerful, and yet they're still considered like your friend and your buddy.
Right.
And
helps when it helps to have like a common foe. Right, like they got helped out recently by being attacked by someone who many people may consider to be like even more of a threat than a large mega corporation.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And so, but also the type of, but they do engage with like, you want to look to someone who does it right. Disney does it right. They really do. They engage with the fans. They have theme parks. They're everywhere. They have the D23 con where they invite people and come. Like, they are the opposite. And they, for better or for worse, it works. It really does. Yeah. It really works. And if Hasbro wants to go down this path, they can't half-ass it. They have to whole ass it. I tell you that.
So so what you're saying is Hasbro needs to create the D&D theme park, because that's where I've heard you say that that Disney gets all their money from, right? From the theme park ticket sales. So that's what we need is the Dungeons and Dragons theme park, and then they'll make the movies and the shows and the games will just funnel people there.
Correct.
And they'll have it.
Look, listen, if they make a D&D theme park with a ride that actually isekai transports you into D&D, like the old animated cartoon, then I'm willing to look past all these controversies and even the Pinkertons, which I find to be like extremely abhorrent, because the ability to be transported into a fantasy world is a product that I don't think that any other company currently has.
Well, Disney will figure it out, I promise. They actually don't even need to do a D&D theme park. They do a co-brand, because that's how Harry Potter got into Universal. That's how Marvel's in Universal. True. They do a co-brand deal, and that's how you do it. And I think they'll probably try. I guarantee they're trying to do a co-brand. The problem with these co-brand deals is that the other company usually pays a lot for it. It's not like, we'll give you the license and you just make this $100 million ride. They're like, no. It's like, you make the $100 million ride and then you get the opportunity to get free advertising for your brand because of us. Like, they each see each other as the one being the big boy in the meeting. That's the problem is like, I've been in those meetings where like we're the ones getting the, I've seen that happen before. Like if you advertise with or like you work with someone and like with Microsoft or some big companies and they're like, oh, how much are you paying us? It's like, no. It's like, we're not paying you a penny. You'll be happy to work with us, and that's pretty common, especially at those levels. But yeah, that's why, well, D&D came out on streaming, so you can watch it now, Mark, by the way. You don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah, I saw that today.
That came out yesterday. So
you go.
You can rent it.
Which streaming service is it on?
I don't know. I think all of them, but it
was Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
and actually YouTube, like Google. Apparently, you can get it.
You can just go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you see the movie?
Yeah, like YouTube has movies. You can rent and buy movies from YouTube, depending on what kind of account you have. I think. Yeah.
Did you see the movie, Bob?
I saw it in the theater. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you like it?
I liked it overall. Yeah. I mean, I just felt like it was fun. It was a good story. Like, for what it's worth, I felt like they made like the right movie. I think they did, like, checked a lot of boxes, and my general opinion was still that it could be enjoyed by pretty much anybody. But if you like D&D, you got more out of it.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved it. And yet it's still
nice. Yeah.
Didn't make back its money.
Yeah. Well, here, let me get your opinion on this, because something that a couple like myself and like a couple friends agreed on was like the title, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, was like part of the mistake, because it just makes people, like, if you don't already have a lot of investment in D&D, it's like, I I don't want to go to this movie where I'm not going to like get the references, whatever, because it was framed so like literally Dungeons and Dragons was actually the title, and then it had a subtitle. Whereas I feel like if they just called it Honor Among Thieves, a D&D story or something along those lines, I feel like the movie would have done better. I think literally the title
I don't know.
was part of
I
its
think
problem.
it might have
I don't
done
know.
worse, but I guess we're just
I've actually-
Because I think all the D&D fans still would have seen it. All the D&D fans still would have seen it, but I think it would have appealed to more people. I don't know.
The Professor Dungeon Master, I think, said the same thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I disagree with both of you. I'll tell you why. First of all, they're putting up a lot of money, so they're not gonna. There's no way in hell they're not putting the name D&D front and center. So that's the first issue.
Okay.
The second thing is I know what they're saying. They say, look, if we make the movie and it's a D&D movie, we're guaranteed to make, I'm just going to make up a number. We're going to make 50 million no matter what. And their floor was set, and hopefully the ceiling was infinite. If they called it whatever a D&D movie, the floor could have been zero. There's no floor, and that's too risky for them. That's why
I feel like it still has D&D in the title.
No,
I feel like everybody
enough.
who likes D&D would still go see it.
Not enough, and well, that's why you have co-brand deals because of name recognition and name branding. So, because of the name branding, I guarantee it made what it made. They look at it, here's what they'll do. And they'll do these Q tests and they'll do tests. I guarantee this was not just they figured it out. They did testing. And they're like, okay, if we call it this.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm sure they did test this. Yeah.
Right. Like, here's the lowest amount and here's the most amount. But then if they say, let's not name it, the lowest amount is way down here and the highest amount's still up here. So, like, dude, we got to bring that bottom up. We're calling it D&D. And
that's a good point, because I guess that did guarantee
it does
the D&D fans in a more solid way.
You want to put the big brand name first. Like, imagine if, like, I don't know, maybe Lion Witch in the Wardrobe is famous enough that everyone knows that's Chronicles of Narnia, but imagine if, like, Prince Caspian did not say Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, or any of those other things. I suppose once a book gets popular enough, like, sure, if you had, like, The Prisoner of Azkaban, and that's all you said. You didn't even say like Harry Potter and or something like that. That maybe that's so famous that it would still have done fine and it wouldn't have been affected by it. But at some point, if you don't have the brand at the front, it does get harder to notice.
Yeah, and they even learned that with Raiders, because Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, and then it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. Now it's Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. They renamed it to get the name back in to make it part of the trilogy. So don't underestimate the power. Okay. Don't underestimate the power of name recognition and branding. It's like, it's a big part of it. I don't disagree with you. I put it this way, I can see it going either way, and I sort of agree. Like, maybe if they used a different name, you could have gotten more of the casuals. Because, like, my son, I'm like, Adam, we're gonna go see a movie. He's like, what is it? I'm like, it's D&D, and he went, oh, and I'm like, dude, trust me, it's getting really good reviews. He's like, oh, I don't want to see a D&D movie, like, you know, and he is exactly why you are. I totally get it, and he's like, but he saw it and he loved it. And it could go the other way. Yeah. And then he could go tell his friends.
Right. Yeah. What I'm getting at is, like, my parents, for example, like, they saw it. Like, they've never played D&D. Like, they just, you know, kind of follow what's going on because they know it's like what I do. But they went and saw it. But it's like, if I wasn't this into D&D, like, I probably still would have gone and seen the movie myself. But, like, my people, like my parents, would have never gone to see this movie. D&D movie, like, they don't know what, like, what, like, you know what I mean? I think there's a lot more people like that who. No, you're right. Who the title, kind of turned them away.
You're 100% right. You don't know if people will just want to see something called Honor Among Thieves either.
But yeah, you're right. So having the guarantee of, like, if we call it D&D, we will get all these people. It was more important to the.
If it was called, like, War of the Dragons or something like that, because that was what it was about. Okay, you know what? Maybe people would definitely want to see War of the Dragons, but I don't know that many people want to see something called Honor Among Thieves, parentheses in small text about D&D at the bottom if they're not going for the D&D anyway, because it's just a very generic, heisty sounding name.
Yeah. You have any other marketing questions for me? I like these questions. These are great questions.
Not off the top of my head.
Oh, I love this stuff. Well, I get to use my real world like knowledge on these things. This is crap I do all day. So it's like fun to. I love this type of stuff. But well, it's also interesting because it's like a lot of people think of it. Not a lot, but it's like it's easy to think of these things sometimes in simple terms, like. Just like you said, it's like D&D. How many people want to see a D&D movie? Probably not a lot. But how many people want to see Honor Among Thieves? Probably less.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's like what Mark was just saying. So,
yeah.
It makes sense where the bottom was for it.
yeah, and that's really the issue. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, the movie. That one I still can't believe. But they were sued by the Pinkertons, and it was settled out of court a couple of years ago. And people are wondering if this was part of the settlement that they had to hire them or something and use them. And I was like,
Wizards was sued by the Pinkertons?
Yeah, because they used like part of them in a magic card or something.
What?
And,
whoa.
Yeah. And it was settled out of court. And I was like, oh, who knows? And their head of security is from the Pinkertons. Like,
I knew they had two people from the Pinkertons hired in there, but I did not know they were sued by the Pinkertons.
Let me double check that one. I saw that. It might be an internet rumor, but let's see. Hasbro.
I feel like I heard that they were at one point sued, or no, that they sued somebody just because of how they were portrayed in something.
Correct. Well, Take-Two was sued over Red Dead Redemption, but that was dismissed. Let's see, because they used them in their game, but that actually did not work out because it was considered like, I don't know. It was just the way they did it. Let's see. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't look this up because you type in Pinkertons and Wizards or Hasbro, and
only one thing's going to come up.
Oh, here we go. The Pinkertons are sued in 2018.
The Pinkertons were sued, or
just Pinkertons sued Hasbro in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Misleading investors or something. I don't know what the hell this is, but I can't get it up because of it wants me to pay to look at it. But yeah. So all I know is if you get magic cards, Rob, make sure you open them up. Just open them all up. Like, here you go, world. See my magic cards and put in your address and say, "Come to me, Pinkertons. Let's see what happens."
Yeah.
Just have a body camera on you at all times. You'll get 1 million views, baby. That's how you do it.
Yeah, I was actually I'm just gonna look it up right now. That guy's channel, because I wanted to see what was it called? Old School Magic?
Yeah, old school, something like that.
Magic the Gathering.
It's got a body cam.
Old school.
I wanted to see if his channel blew up after this.
Because it had 4,000 people before that. Yeah. I bet it has a lot more now that they hired the Pinkertons.
But it's fascinating because I've seen people. This is the only story. Like you were saying, the OGL, there was only one side. This one mostly is on his side, but some people are like, look, he knew he had the cards early. He knew he, quote, shouldn't be opening them because he knew he got the wrong box. However, WotC changed the rule a few months or years ago that if once you own Magic cards, they're fair game. Like, there's no embargoed release date. It's like when you have them, you have them, and use them, then use them. So I'm like, dude, that's your own rule that you changed recently.
All of just general laws. If he got it in a non-nefarious way, someone sent it to him wrong, which is what happened when he tried to order the other one. It's totally not legal for them to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, but I guess the loophole is that he, even though he was coerced, he did give them. I don't know. So there's a case that could be made absolutely on his side for first of all, I completely agree that this was screwed up of WotC to do this. I don't want it to sound like I'm agreeing with them. But it's people are saying it's he opened his door, I guess he let him inside. I guess he gave him all the cards. So it's like at the end of the day, he kind of like he gave it. So I don't know. I would have probably done the same thing. I would have absolutely done the same thing. But
the problem is that they intimidated him with the Pinkertons, who notoriously I don't know, were sent to kill like
people in the past.
Workers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And even though they're not sent literally to kill people nowadays, they still, I think, killed a protester recently. Like,
jeez. Yeah, I didn't know that.
They don't kill tons of people nowadays like they did.
But it's amazing that this company still exists.
Well, yeah.
Like how do they get
I
away
did a
with
mini.
this?
If you watch my video, I did a history of the Pinkertons because not everyone knew that, and it was a mini history too. It was a very quick one. They were. Well, they're the model for the CIA and the FBI.
Right. Okay. I do remember you saying that part. Yeah.
And they were the law. Like they were literally the law, the judge,
they
the
were
jury,
bigger than
and
any other like there were no
they're bigger
police
than the
forces
army.
and stuff. And,
they were
bigger than the
they
army,
were.
You said, yeah.
Yep. That's what they were considered enforcement for most states, companies, private industry, everything. Like if you needed cops, there weren't such things really as cops.
Right. Yeah.
So you hired the Pinkertons, and they would do it for you. And then there was all these anti-Pinkerton laws in each state, and then there was an anti-Pinkerton federal law, and then they made the FBI and CIA instead to pick up the slack. And then local police also started to become a thing. So like before local police, it was the Pinkerton. The close example is because this is kind of how it still works in Japan with the Yakuza. They kind of are the police because the police are a little ineffective in Japan. I'm not dissing on Japan, but Japan's police are not super strong compared to the Yakuza. And if you need things done, you call the Yakuza because they'll take care of it for you. And it still exists, this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. I think in other parts of the world, it's more common for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot more
like
common.
think of
imagine,
You go ahead. Yeah.
This is a company that is so messed up that literally in the 1890s they had to pass a federal act limiting the ability to hire them. Yeah,
because they were bigger than the United States Army, and they were getting out of hand because of the Homestead Act and all that. And they realized, oh my God, if the Pinkertons decided to overthrow the United States government, they'd probably win.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like they were literally building up this military force.
Yeah, no, they were stronger. They were stronger than the U.S. military.
For a campaign.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's why they just made them illegal, and then they kind of disappeared, sort of. They kept the name around, and then they became Then they became detectives, and that's where Private Eye supposedly comes from.
Well, yeah. And so here's one thing.
That's
I haven't looked this up since. I haven't looked it up, but in my mind, I seriously always just thought the term private eye, I've just never seen it written out. I always thought it was literally just an abbreviation of private investigator, starting with an I, like PI, So there's a private eye.
So there was, so in the 40s, in the 30s and 40s, pulp writing was unbelievably popular, especially pulp mysteries and, like Private Dicks, Private Eyes, all that stuff.
So was it like Raymond Chandler who used Private Eye first?
Yes, it was Raymond Chandler, and he used Private Eye, and the name of...
And it's written out EYE, you're saying now.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. Yeah. And, the Pinkertons were known as the Eye, and they have...
We never sleep, and they have an unblinking eye is their logo. Right. And they've got this
panopticon eye with like the beam coming out of it.
Because
literally like an Illuminati.
Illuminati. Sauron,
they kept...
How many?
Because they stayed awake to keep President Lincoln alive during an assassination attempt, and that's how they got that's how they got We Never Sleep, and then they came up with the eye as their logo, and then Private Eye, correct. So it all just to show you, but that's what I'm saying, like little things,
how deep it goes.
Correct, and that's what I'm saying about little things in design. It's like you'd be amazed how deep.
It could still be a pun that was a private investigator too, though. Like we don't know exactly why Raymond Chandler did it.
Yeah,
it could be both.
Yeah, it could be like a play on words with that.
That's why they say it's called.
Yeah,
it says it's allegedly. It's not been proven either way, but it's pretty well.
Can't go back and ask him. Yeah,
it's assumed that's where it came from, and it makes sense.
It's plausible enough. Yeah,
and it's a good story at least.
But, right.
But that's what I'm very big into that stuff. I'm very fascinated how like one thing will determine Like they talk about like the size of our roads and the size of our cars. Oh, this is not true at all.
It's the Roman Empire, right?
Totally false, by the way.
That's
Not
false.
true at
There
all.
you go.
But it's a good story.
It's a well-known sort of urban legend
Yes.
that the Roman Empire's chariots are why we do things.
Correct.
Oh, I've actually never heard that one, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't buy it. Yeah,
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
you
Well, the idea
go-
is the Roman Empire established roads all across everywhere for
Yes.
their chariots at a certain
Yeah.
width, and so therefore, when people started building roads for cars and other things, they were using the same width as the ones that the Romans had built. That is the myth.
The myth. But here's the thing. If you ever go to Europe, especially in Pompeii and places like that, and this is insane, because like Pompeii, it blows my mind. The roads are made out of stone. There are actual gutters, like huge wedges in the stone roads of where the carts would go. The carts would go back and forth on these roads so frequently that they make deep ruts in the road. So that's like, okay, they had to be around, which they were, for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years, using the same roads over and over again to make ruts in stone,
In the stone, yeah.
using wood. And it's still here today. And you're like, and they don't even exist anymore. That's when my brain starts to hurt. I'm like, do you know how much effort it takes to like make like a 6-inch rut in stone, and it's everywhere. But that is also why they did keep the same widths, because the ruts were made, and if you tried to make it a different width, it wouldn't work. It would fall out of the rut and break your cart. So there is some truth to the story, but not complete truth. And they also, there's a lot of those type of things.
Yeah, it makes sense for, I guess, the area that encompassed the Roman Empire. But
yes.
Once you go beyond that, your carts might be different. Yeah.
So this was a lot of fun, but I actually have to go because I got to go into the city. And I did say to Bob, I'm like, how long will it be? I'm like 1-2 hours. Meanwhile, 3 hours later.
Wah, wah.
Bob's having so much fun. We don't want to.
I don't want to end the chat early, but I did. Yeah, like I said, round 5 was when I
gotta go.
leave too. So this is good timing.
Yeah, I gotta go.
All right. Then take care.
Good thing we stayed on topic the whole time, and it was great chatting with you guys.
Yeah, and
so on topic.
Yeah, so on topic, and don't forget, do check out RPG Superstar if you want to be published in this book. That's right, you can be published in our next one. And look, you get your name and everything. Look, your name's here, and you get a prize, and you get paid, and this can turn into something. It actually can. There's a couple people that are starting to get work because of this. So it's a real thing. And you just go to rpgsuperstar.com and just put out some monsters that we like.
That could be the new slogan, RPG Superstar. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing, baby. Because some people wonder, it's like, can you really get work by putting out one monster? And people are, like, especially now, like after they won 2, those people, some of our writers, they've managed to get work, like real, like, paying work in the industry, and they're pretty happy about it. And that's where they got started, A lot of people, it's like one monster can really...
I'll be a testimonial. Goodman Games asked me to write a monster for their book, and then they were like, hey, this is good. Do you want to write an adventure? So I'm going to have a one-shot coming out through them.
See? Look at that.
It happens.
It happens.
You can do it.
You can do it. Just go to rpgsuperstar.com. It's that easy. And we'll be back. We're going to have Bob on the show every week. That's our new thing. He doesn't care. He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. No, I'm kidding. Can't have you on every week. I mean,
we'll do it another time.
We'll do it another time. And we should go on
all
Bob's show. But do you do live shows, Bob, or no? Just all recorded?
I haven't streamed yet, but maybe on my podcast or something we'll do it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. All right. Well, thanks,
Take
everyone.
care, everybody. We'll see you on the next Roll for Combat Live, which who knows when that'll be.
Who knows?
But at least by
whenever
next
I feel
week.
like it.
Yeah, whenever Steven feels like it, he'll be like, hey, there's going to be a stream, Mark. I was like, when? In 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
You're right. You rarely give me that much
I rarely
time.
give you 30 minutes. 3 minutes. You're like, oh, God.
I was being too generous.
You
You're
were
right.
being way too nice.
All
All
right.
right.
Till next time.